This never happened to the other fella.
Welcome back to Ranked. I'm Charles.
I'm McCurdy.
I'm Patterson.
I'm Scott.
I'm Nathan.
Tonight we are discussing On Her Majesty's Secret Service, starring George Lazenby.
Lazenby.
Lazenby. Lazenby. It doesn't fucking matter because he only did one movie. We have entered a new world, gentlemen. The Connery formula has been reset as On Her Majesty's Secret Service brings with it a new approach, a new Bond, and a new Blofeld to boot, whom James Bond has been searching for the last 2 years. After a chance encounter with a young countess named Teresa, Bond meets her father, Draco, the head of his own criminal organization. Draco points Bond in the direction of the evil head of Spectre, who is now running an allergy clinic in the Swiss Alps. Bond, posing as a genealogist, is invited to the clinic in order to confirm the nobility status of Blofeld and discovers his latest evil plot, the worldwide distribution of a deadly virus via his angels of death, the patients of his clinic. Before we get going, I want to just do a little review catch-up, considering the fact that we did, the first 5 films, all starring Connery. Now we're pivoting hard tonight. What we found is that the first 3 films just kept one-upping each other, regardless of classiness or realism or fun or whatever. They simply kept getting better. Then Thunderball's reach exceeded its grasp as it went all out, but there were some plot shortcomings that we all felt moved it to the bottom, including a shit bad guy, and therefore it lacked that completeness of the first 3. But with You Only Live Twice, as much as it improved on those awkward plot points, the characters, namely Brandt and Blofeld, were just not as solid or interesting and came across as lazy, and even if Thunderball's Largo was a dumb shit, his extortion play still made more sense than Blofeld's rocket scheme, so we kept Thunderball in 4th, and You Only Live Twice in last place at number 5. Last episode, I asked McCurdy why they hid Blofeld's face in the films before You Only Live Twice. I was asking so far as the Thunderball licensing issues were concerned. I thought perhaps this was the original reason as to why they hid his face, as opposed to simple stylistic choices. If they originally hid his face for legal reasons, it would have been like the happy accident with the Jaws shark puppet not working, thereby making the film better by restricting our view of the monster, allowing our imaginations to fill in the blank, in a way that actualization never could. With that being said, we have an all-new Blofeld here, not a cartoon sitting in a chair who is later revealed for no real purpose other than shock, but a real character. So we have a Blofeld spectrum that has formed, one where he is hidden and becomes more than just a man, but becomes something like Sauron's evil eye, a source of paranoia and fear and omnipresence, and the other where he is flesh and blood, but a cunning adversary for Bond, and can make war both physically as well as with words he exchanges man to man. Coincidentally, so too for James Bond. Instead of a superhero, this time around we have a man. If ever one was to cry during a James Bond film, it might just be this one, as it is more of a dramatic thriller than a super spy action film. All in all, it isn't all fun and games for the audience, nor Bond, who actually has a lowest point, and is significantly more expressive and at times actually shows fear as well as regret and sadness. Ultimately, this film raises the argument about Bond himself and drives a viewer to ask themselves, what is my cup of tea? Ice in his veins, super spy 007, or a more human, emotionally vulnerable James Bond?
I love you. I know I'll never find another girl like you.
So on the history side of things, McCurdy, what you got for us?
So, of course, this is 1969. This is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is, to me, the middle chapter of the end of the Connery era, even though Connery doesn't show up in this film. It's also the second film in what people like to describe as the Blofeld trilogy. But what probably most people, and what we're here to talk about mostly, is George Lazenby. And it's our second James Bond, but it's also his first and last appearance in this film. So who is George Lazenby? George Lazenby was an Australian male model who was ridiculously good looking, if I'm quoting Zoolander.
If you like butt chins.
Yes, and at the time, he was probably best known for, I mean, I don't think any of us have had this, but Big Fry's Chocolates, he was like the spokesperson. I wouldn't even say it's a spokesperson. He was in those commercials, but people knew him from those commercials. At one point, Lazenby gets a call from his agent that they are looking for James Bond. So he goes to, and this is a very condensed version of the story, mind you, but he goes to Connery's barber, gets his hair cut there, like Connery. He goes to Connery's tailor, gets a suit that Connery doesn't pick up, that he didn't pick up at all, but it was Connery's suit. And then he gets to the audition room. When he's at the audition room, he has to sneak past the receptionist to get to the auditions because they didn't have his name on the list. So when the receptionist is looking down at her desk, he bolts past her, and then he is met face to face with producer Harry Salzman. He lies his ass off. He told Salzman, I was in all these foreign films. What were you? He was asking about all this stuff because he looks at him. He's like, yeah, this looks like our next James Bond. When he finally goes to meet Peter Hunt, which I believe we may have talked about, but he was the editor for all the previous Bond films. This time he's directing in the director's chair. He tells Peter Hunt, it's like, I can't do this. I'm a model. I've never acted for my life. And Peter Hunt tells him, those are the two most ruthless men I know. If you could lie to those two men, you are an actor. So obviously, to become Bond, he has to do a bunch of screen tests. And we talked a little bit about screen tests when we talked about From Russia with Love. So he did several screen tests, of course. He did some acting screen tests. He did some action screen tests. But the best test that he probably was put up was they sent a prostitute and her pimp to his hotel room just so that they were sure that he wasn't gay. And I assure you, he's not gay. So you can see what happened there. But it's amazing to me that they went that far if they were going to settle on who's the next James Bond.
I wonder if they did that for every single Bond, or if there was something about Lazenby that they were like, let's just make sure on this guy.
It may have been because he was a male model, and they were like, are we sure he's not gay?
Yeah.
But and again, this is a different time. Things are very different at this time period. So they wanted to make sure that the guy that they were getting to play Bond was a masculine, macho guy, of course. So macho and so masculine that when they were doing the screen test or the stunt test, he didn't hold his punches back. So he punched this stunt guy in the nose.
So he John Rhys Davis to them is what you're saying.
What's that?
he John Rhys Davis to them.
And
is that a Lord of the Rings thing, or is that an Indiana Jones thing, or is that
John Rhys
James
Davis
Bond
was like
thing?
Notorious in Lord of the Rings for just like jacking dudes hardcore. The stuntmen were like, please don't try to take us out, and he always 100% of the time did it.
So he knocks this guy's schnoz, and the guy falls to the ground, and it was either Salzman or Broccoli, but the producers basically, he thought he f***ed up, and the producer just smashes him into the wall, and he says, we're going with you. So he knew he had the job at that moment.
Now, McCurdy and Patterson have previously made it clear that they do not see eye to eye on the merits of this particular film.
And I think Patterson's an idiot.
So we are... hold up. So we are going to do something a little different this time. We are going to allow each of them the courtesy of a brief... I'll just say brief, but I'm not going to draw bounds around it. Strict boundaries around it. Opening statements to make clear both their overall ideas on the movie plus their ranking. I want you guys to lay out your argument, and then cap your argument with your list. So, coin flip. You guys go to the coin flip?
I'm okay with the coin flip.
That's great.
I'm just going to arbitrarily put, just because McCurdy's on top in my Zoom, I'm going to put McCurdy as heads and Patterson as tails.
Sounds good.
And I'm going to flip this onto the floor.
All right.
That went really far away. And rolled into the next room.
Damn it.
How about we have Patterson go first, because I had just spoken, and I'm very curious to where he stands on this.
Patterson, you accept?
I accept this.
That quarter went really far away from me. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I would like to begin my segment with some acknowledgments and apologies. Acknowledgements. Yes, I did write this as a script. I know we're generally shooting to be organic on this podcast, but this is too important to me to not get it right. And it also saves time. I also want shout out to Charlie Myers for basically doing 100% of the behind the scenes work for this podcast. He's a real MVP.
Oh, now he's buttering me
up.
up. Buttering me up.
I am shamelessly.
That's hilarious.
I said uninterrupted. I'll hold myself
it's
back.
Fine. Apologies to Nance and Scott. You're probably going to get talked over a lot during this one, and I'm a dick for doing it, but this is going to get real.
That's all right.
To our faint-hearted listeners and family of mine that may eventually listen to this, you're about to hear some really offensive shit come out of my mouth. Sorry, not sorry. And lastly, to McCurdy, I do like and respect you, and you do have good opinions, but for the sake of entertainment, I'm about to tear you a new asshole. We've been looking forward to doing this one since we started doing this podcast, and in honor of that, I've taken the liberty of crafting a poem. That's right, a poem. Dedicated to McCurdy for having the opposite opinion of me on this film. I also decided to do it because I'm a classy and respectable gentleman. So without further ado, I present to you this poem entitled, Go Fuck Yourself, Eat Shit, and Die. McCurdy, McCurdy, your butthole is dirty. Your arguments hardly hold sway. It is never a shock when George Lazenby's cock happens to be headed your way. McCurdy, your face makes me hurty, and your opinions I'll thoroughly slay. Soon enough you'll be spanked on our podcast called Ranked, and I will defeat you this day. McCurdy, your mouth looks real purty. That's what George Lazenby would say. Your semen is spilt when you see Bond in a kilt, without any need for foreplay. McCurdy, you'll be missing your shirty when I kick your ass clear to Bombay. However, I must admit, it's now time for you to eat shit. So let's get our podcast underway. Love you, McCurdy. Love you. Even if you're a Bond movie snob.
Very curious thing, snobbery.
So
hold on. Was that your opening statement? Was that it?
No. That is just. I just wanted to.
That was just foreplay from what it sounds like.
Oh, it is.
You just wanted to write that.
I did.
You just wanted to put that. You just wanted to be poetic.
Yes, I did.
McCurdy, you best get to writing.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm great.
I was just struck with inspiration, and that came out of my mind.
I applaud you. I think that was very lovely. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I think I rank you very high on this podcast of individuals.
I appreciate that immensely.
Just for that, because that was very nice.
Fellas, before we start sucking each other's dicks too hard, back on point, Patterson said before that he said early on that he would largely judge these films based on how they stand up by themselves. So,
yes,
Patterson, tell us your thoughts on this one.
Okay, so what's good? I'm going to start with what's good. The setting. I really, really do like the mountain backdrop, and I think they used it well. I think they did some fun stuff with it. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say that's probably my favorite location that we've seen so far in the Bond films. John Barry's score is excellent. It is a very well scored movie. The action is probably the best so far in this franchise. I'll also give it that. The janitor whistling the Goldfinger theme, that's just, I love that. That is a great example of a subtle nod to previous films. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now on to the 13 sins of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Number 1, the romance between Bond and Tracy is terrible. I don't get why Bond likes her. If you're gonna fuck her, that's fine. Hit it and quit it.
Please stay alive. At least for tonight.
But he fucking married her. I mean, shit. During their first encounter, she was about to kill herself. She seems mentally unstable in general. She's definitely not wife material. If you have ever seen the video of the crazy hot Matrix, she's in the fun zone at best. I'd personally put her in the danger zone. Also, he obviously forgot all about her when he meets the Angels of Death. I mean, fuck Jimmy, keep it in your pants while you're undercover, for fuck's sake. Number 2, Lazenby sucks at playing Bond. Doesn't seem comfortable with the role. Seems like he's trying to dial it in when he's relying too much on Connery's performance without being Sean Connery. Also, don't draw attention to it by breaking the fourth wall with a cringeworthy, this didn't happen to the other guy line, you dumb f***.
This never happened to the other fella.
Sound effects were bad. Even for its time, it just sounded like shit. It was much better in the previous films. The whole I'm quitting MI6 scene is dumb. Seems like a childish thing for Bond to do. Moneypenny even pulls a mom move to stop it from happening. That's a full-blown mom move, if I've ever seen one. Number 6, Blofeld doesn't recognize Bond, which is an obvious and avoidable continuity error. We'll save that one for discussion, but none of you can deny that that's a colossal oversight.
Yeah.
It's way too elaborate of a plan to brainwash the Angels of Death. Why not just plant loyal Spectre agents around the world to distribute the biological warfare shit? You're the mastermind of Spectre, after all. It should be much easier to coordinate that logistically. And the whole Angels of Death concept is just an excuse to have a babe parade. Bond's plan to impersonate
Not
Bray...
that we're against that at all. Sorry, go ahead.
Bond's plan to impersonate Bray is stupid when he knew that Blofeld was actively corresponding with him. There's too much that can go wrong. And indeed it does go wrong as he gives himself away due to making a mistake Bray wouldn't have made, in addition to being entirely incapable of not trying to cram his dick inside every available vagina that he encounters. They redshirted that poor Campbell harder than I've ever seen a character in any movie ever get redshirted. He stood less of a chance than a dickhead jock guy in a teen horror flick. Blofeld's motive doesn't make sense. The world isn't just going to pretend that you didn't just threaten to kill everyone on the planet, even if you do get totally amnesty. He'd be ostracized, even if he succeeded, considering his career as the CEO of a global terrorist organization. And you also mean to tell me that he orchestrated all of this entire scheme just to give up on his life of villainy. I'm sorry, but I will never be okay with the fact that Bond is in a kilt. He does not belong in a kilt. That's just an objective fact. You can go f*** yourself if you believe otherwise. Oh, hey, remember that dude who tried to kill you? Let's have him at your wedding. And lastly, radioactive lint has to be the worst gadget in the entire franchise. I mean, seriously, how f***ing stupid is that? In summation, I'm going to go ahead and rank this turd-wrangling piece of shit dead last. Patterson's ranking: Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, Dr. No, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and you can bet your ass I'm going to advocate leaving it at the bottom of the list for the rest of the f***ing season.
All right, I just want to toast to Patterson. That was a fantastic rant. The 13 sins of OHMSS.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I got to say, before we move to McCurdy, I have to say, all of that is true. Every last fucking sentence of that is true. There's a big butt there, which
of course.
is, you know,
I expect there to be butts.
The big butt chin in the room, McCurdy. I believe you've always liked this movie, but
Yeah.
people didn't seem to give a shit about this movie until Chris Nolan came along and claimed it as a favorite, citing it as inspiration for and fully incorporating it into the third act / third dream of Inception.
That's true.
Why should we regard this movie as higher status than any of the Connery films?
Okay, so first off, we have to make a very big distinction because Nans has said this the last podcast, and we've talked about this. You had mentioned it in our arguments with Goldfinger, is the distinction between plot and story. And the thing about the Bond films in general is they're very heavy on plot, very little on story. And you guys will be like, well, wait, I thought those were the same thing. They are not. Plot generally refers to the events that happen in the story. So when we're all arguing about plot inconveniences with Thunderball, such as why does this happen if the logic of this doesn't happen? Patterson, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about are like plot inconveniences, like the Blofeld thing, which I have to acknowledge is, yes, that is something that a lot of people talk about in this movie. But you also said yourself that you want to regard these movies by themselves and not in the continuity of them all, correct?
I did say that.
You did say that. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, it doesn't really matter if Blofeld doesn't recognize if it's Bond. I'll also add just a behind the scenes thing is you have to realize that, yeah, they're starting with a new Bond. This movie is, in a way, a new beginning for Bond because, of course, they are you have to also think from the perspective of, regardless of you think he's not a good Connery or whatever, it's his first film, regardless, not just first film as James Bond, but also that this is his first James Bond film. He doesn't really get into the role. Connery doesn't really make a really good improvement till Goldfinger, I think, or really good Bond till Goldfinger. He's great in the other two movies, don't get me wrong. Let me go back to what I was talking about, story versus plot. And this movie has a lot more story going on before it, regardless of what you think, because I completely disagree with you. I think Tracy and Bond make a lot more sense than I think you think they do. And that's where I think you and I fundamentally, like, you see it like surface levels, like, no, this is stupid. And I'm like, no, there's a lot more going on in this movie than I think you realize. Like, this movie is deep. It's got better story and more plot.
More
I'm gonna
love.
Be Scott for two seconds there. But when I talk about story is generally stuff about the why, the who, the theme, those deeper things that happen in a story. In the beginning of the movie, he's like, yeah, Tracy's great, but I'm more worried about finding Blofeld. And I kind of pinpointed the theme. The theme of this movie is the struggle between his job and his own life. Is he going to have a future? And that mainly is represented in Tracy. And that's, to me, where this movie excels. And it's not just there's other things that are great about this movie, like you had mentioned John Barry's score. I'd also throw in the hat, the cinematography in this movie is some of the best cinematography in most of the Bond films. But I think, like, your disregard for Bond giving up on the mission is like that's a fundamental part of the story itself. And Charlie has constantly talked about how Bond does everything for the job. He's always about the mission. He's never about the pussy. But this is the first one where he is more about the pussy than just the mission at some points in the film.
Completely.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing, because then it shows a struggle within Bond. He's not just a superhero like he is in many of the other films, battling out with these different supervillains and doing all those things. So that scene that you're referring to when he quits, to me, that is the beginning of that story where it's, I'm kind of fed up with the people that are in charge of me, are getting in the way of this mission.
I'm relieving you from Operation Bedlam, 007.
But, sir, Blofeld's something of a must with me.
Maybe, should I continuously do this? Should it, like, and that to me is like when that begins in the film. Like the great shot, one of my favorite shots in the movie is when he's taking a drink and you see the reflection of his face with the Queen looking at him. And it's almost like, fuck you. Like, I can't believe this. Fuck you. I'm fucking quitting. And I know it seems silly, but to me, that's what that scene says. And then even later on, that scene's called back when Bond asks him, he says, look, we have to go save Tracy. We have to go do this. Like, we could stop Blofeld. We could blow up his compound. But then M's like, no, that's the end of it. And you see a callback to that scene. He gets on the phone, and who's in the background? It's the portrait of the Queen. It's like him saying, fuck you. I'm going to go do what I think is best. And the movie even ends in a way that this could be the end chapter of the Bond franchise, where he leaves MI6 to go on his new life. And I also think that this movie has themes of life versus death. I mean, essentially, Blofeld's plan is, even if you think the hypnotism thing is too outlandish, which I don't really think it is, the idea is basically, I'm going to basically make everything on Earth infertile. Like, that's worse than an atomic bomb. Like, if we're talking about stakes, which I know Charlie has said in the past, it's like, stakes doesn't matter. Stakes doesn't matter. This film is personal as well. It has really great personal stakes, because if he doesn't, obviously in the end of the movie, if he doesn't save Tracy, he's going to lose at that point the love of his life, because he even says it at that moment. And even earlier in the movie, Tracy even says,
but what could be better than being in love?
Mr. Bond, he's in love with you.
That may come too, someday.
because even in the audience is like, does he love her? Because we've watched 5 movies before, and he usually just bangs these chicks and, runs off to the next chick. And he's like, she questions that. And he's the one who proposes to her. So then when you get to the end of the film, it's not just he has to stop Blofeld, or else, there's a chance that literally the end of the world. It's not just the East versus the West this time. It is like the entire world. We could see the extinction of everything. It's also like his. Sorry, I get emotional about this movie because it's like, it's just great.
I get it.
Like I think it's a beautiful movie.
I actually get it.
That's
Did
to
I
me
did
why
I not
this
say
movie is
that if
great.
you were gonna cry about one
I will
Bond
cry
movie,
about this movie.
it would be this one?
So
And it's not, and I'm not even mentioning the scene when she dies because it's like super tragic. Okay, I can't continue anymore. Sorry.
first of all, I'm
Scott
going to
or
go ahead and
Nance, you
say
gotta-
that I'm glad that you followed up my poem about you sucking George Lazenby's dick. and
Hey, I thank you. I thank you for your humor.
all these horrible
I thank you
things.
for your humor. I
Patterson,
thank
you made him
for your
cry, you
humor.
monster.
Episodes over,
Oh,
McCurdy
man.
wins. He cried.
Yeah.
We can't argue
yeah.
with that. McCurdy needs to rank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Please do.
Okay, it's difficult for me because I think all of Connery's movies, they're heavy on the plot side.
It's almost like what you're saying is that story is a combination of plot and characters rather than just here's the stuff that happened.
Well,
Right?
well, there
the
are other
characters
films.
allow
the
for
other
change and
Yeah, the other side of it, though, it could be a story. It could be movies like Richard Link. If you know who Richard Linklater is, like his movies are very story heavy. Not a lot happens, but it's characters talking about their feelings and how, like, things like that. And I feel like the best movies usually combine the two, where they have plot, where actions and things happen, and you're invested, and you're like, okay, what's going to happen next? And they have the more fizzles. What's the word I'm looking for?
Well, and like I said at the outset, you have a Bond who is just a superhero, and he can do anything, and he gets the babe and all that. Or you have a Bond who is more of a human, and maybe he changes, and and I said that early on. I said, does Bond ever change? The guy never changes. He's just the same guy. There's a very real change here. The whole movie is about Bond changing, and it's almost as if Peter Hunt, who edited every movie up until this point, got fed up with, there's so much more you could be doing with this character. Let's actually do something different with this character and take his super spy, superhero status away from him to the point where he's just a man, and let's play with that. And I think he did a decent job with it, but I think the more we talk, I think I'm more prone to agree with Patterson because, like I said at the outset, what's your cup of tea? Is your cup of tea to have the flawed man, or to have the ice in his veins badass motherfucker? And me, I like to live in both places. Same old disclaimer as always. I like all these movies. They're all different. There's a diverse array when it comes to these Bonds, but I think my cup of tea is generally going to be that ice in his veins badass motherfucker. The Bond that this movie creates, because Bond after this is ice in his veins, never fall in love again. Badass motherfucker who will not, who survives because of that ice in his veins and will never be emotionally compromised again, because at the end of this movie he realizes he really only just has the one life.
He doesn't have all the
service
time.
to Her Majesty.
Okay, so that being said, because that's my quandary. Is that the right word? Yeah,
that's right.
That's the right word.
That's
My
definitely
quandary
right.
You're
is
George Bush at this point. You make up your own words.
George Bushism. My quandary is that
you even say nuclear like George Bush. Nuclear instead of nuclear. Nuclear. Yeah.
Nuclear weapons. My quandary here is that I think From Russia with Love and Goldfinger are also great films, but I can't put myself to say this movie is worse than Thunderball or You Only Live Twice or Dr. No. Like, I can make arguments. I could see it going.
What's your rank, though? Tell us.
I
What's
could
your rank?
say-
know your rank.
So my list would be Goldfinger on top still, From Russia with Love, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Dr. No, Thunderball, then You Only Live Twice.
Okay.
So if I may make my short rebuttal,
Yes.
I am definitely the guy who prefers ice in his veins Bond 100%. You like Charlie, if you're in both places and McCurdy's on like the showing the flawed character.
I'm not
of
in
Bond.
both places. I can visit, but I like to live with ice in his veins, badass motherfucker.
I've never even visited the other side. That's what I'm
And
saying.
if you're a Bond purist, that's where you are.
Yeah.
You're the ice in his veins. Like I survive because I'm not emotionally available. That's what keeps him alive.
Yeah. So to speak to McCurdy's points, I've never even considered watching a Bond film for its emotional content before. And I actually thought that it's really cool, like, that you take that perspective from it, because I've never even considered doing that before. And I think if you're going to look at it from that perspective, which is one I hadn't considered, I can see why you would not rank this last. And I still disagree with you, and I still rank it last. But I can see why you wouldn't rank it last.
I'm also going to add that, again, like I said, the cinematography in this movie is probably some of the best. And,
I would agree
here's
with
the
that.
other. I'm gonna even
Like we said before,
entertain
though.
the side.
Like we said before, though, that doesn't automatically make it better. Like,
no, we talked
this morning,
about it
McCurdy,
last time.
This morning, I took a really nice dump, and do you want to see it? I took a picture. Do you want to see it?
I don't want to see it. Is this your
well,
point?
The photo is beautiful. The photo of this dump is absolutely beautiful. Are you sure you don't want to see it?
But this movie is not a dump.
The lighting's
yeah, I believe y'all are picking up what I'm putting down. That doesn't automatically make it better. It's a fine. I mean, I'm the guy who said last time that the cinematography of You Only Live Twice, that's not why it's at the bottom, but it doesn't help, right? So yes, this is probably the best shot movie so far, and it has the advantage of having a guy who was always the editor, then jumping into the direction spot, because good editors generally make good directors, because they know how the movie would be put together, and you start to see certain shots that take it away from this classic Hollywood style shooting, which is what largely the first 5 were. Classic Hollywood style being just it is very clean, and we talked about how they have like speed up stuff and sneaky jump cuts and stuff in there, and they do that out of necessity, not out of design. This movie says forget all that. It's the first movie that really feels like it wasn't just shot on a series of sets. It feels like it's shot in the real world. You get a larger array of angles inside of places like MI6, within Moneypenny's office, within M's office. You see more. It's like Hunt was like, can we finally get cross the 180 line so that we can see more of the office? They probably had moving walls on the set so that they could accomplish that, as opposed to with early Bond, it's just like, here's the fourth wall, and we're never gonna see that fourth wall. And that's what differentiates like classic Hollywood style from this new. I mean, this movie's from 1969, but it feels like a 70s movie, and then they really start breaking up. Like the editing in the fight scenes especially is really kind of all over the place. They're not afraid to just like do these quick jump cuts, because what they're trying to do is have this more brutal fight. All in all, it's a very ambitious movie that clearly came from a guy who sat editing it for years and then finally got in the director's chair and was like, I'm going to shit up. And I'm going to really explore this character of Bond. I do think, though, that as much as he just went for it, I don't know if he quite made it, largely for most of the reasons that Patterson laid down.
This is my last point I'm going to make, and this is in regards to how I view the film and how I approach ranking the quality or assessing the quality of any particular artistic endeavor, whether it be an actual art piece or cooking or filmmaking or video game design. The question that I always ask myself when I'm trying to assess something's quality in terms of its artistic merit is, could they have done any better? And that's why I rank this film poorly, is because all the things I listed were things that I felt they could have corrected and failed to do so. And that is why I assess it so low, is because I think there were obvious and simple mistakes. That's why I consider, I love Star Wars. I love Star Wars more than I love Lord of the Rings. Subjectively, but objectively, I'm like, Lord of the Rings are better films because they don't make any mistakes. They make zero mistakes, which is why they're better films. And that's why I rank this so low, is because they made a lot of fucking mistakes that they didn't have to make.
And again, I completely disagree. And for one, I will also say that this movie, they wanted to go back to following the novel. Because again, like I said, the last episode, they were like, oh, we're going to throw the book out.
We don't give a fuck about no books.
Yeah. So
we only
this
care
book,
about how the movie comes across.
If you don't like certain aspects, it could be because that was taken out straight from the book.
But that's why when you're adapting it, you fix that shit.
This is a tough one. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I personally am more with McCurdy in that I love the broken down emotional bond. I love that just for a break from that ice cold veins and super spy feel of it. I love that little break to show that he is a man and to remind us in that, okay, as Charlie said, at the end of this, they create that ice cold bond. He's like, F this, I'm never loving again. I think I agree more with McCurdy in that I do believe that Tracy and his relationship was purposeful. I do think there is more in the background there.
Do you have a rank?
But I'm not going to say that it's better than Dr. No. I think I'd put it at 4 or 5.
Okay. Nenyo-san.
And I think this film is refreshing. I think it's different. So
without a doubt, that statement is true.
Yeah.
That it is.
I think all of us can unanimously agree about that.
Yeah. It's after the big, crazy $10 million of You Only Live Twice, they come through with something a little more personal and small, and that's an intelligent play. That's a good move in any franchise, is to do just that. And on that note, I never said that. Well, hang on. I never said that stakes don't matter. I said that the stakes don't automatically, bigger stakes don't automatically make better movie, right? Because my point was that every movie could always just be like, well, the city's gonna, or this person's gonna die. Well, in this movie, the city's going to die. In this movie, the country's going to die. The world's going to die. The universe is going to die. Bigger stakes doesn't mean better movie. Stakes matter, but size of stakes are irrelevant compared to story quality. That was my point.
I'm also going to add, I guess, to my point. I like how Bond shows that he is naturally heroic, not necessarily just for Queen and Country. That he still believes. McCurdy reference, kind of as sorry, ma'am, or, finger to the Queen and to the service and saying, we could do better. We don't need to always follow the books. He goes and heroically does it, not just for love. Obviously, love is a purpose, but he also, you could clearly tell he has a desire to save the world at the same time and just not following the rules.
Yeah, as much as he doesn't have maybe ice in his veins, as you guys like to put it, I do, as I watch this movie, it's still, to me, the same Bond, because even though, yes, he, and when we talk about vulnerability, it's only in maybe a tiny number of scenes, especially like the montage with him and Tracy and, when they get engaged, especially the end of the film. But he's still heroic. He's still committed to the mission. He still has that white whale, which is Blofeld, that he is still searching for. I mean, he's offered $1 million.
On the day you marry her, I'll give you a personal dowry of 1 million pounds.
But I don't need £1 million.
Stupido.
And he turns it down and says, I don't want $1 million. I want to know where Blofeld is. You're the other organization that you have connections that I don't have. I need to know where this guy is. I'll date Tracy for that. Can you do that?
But we've established in the past that Bond doesn't care about money, right? Again, the fall of Grant was greed, which I argued heavily that didn't make sense. The fall of Bond in this, Bond's fucking dick is what fails. This time, like, this movie could have been called Pussy Over Mission.
Yeah, or alternatively, Bond's dick gets him into trouble.
Exactly. Like, Patterson, you and I argued last time where I still think that the Connery movies are largely mission over pussy, with Bond occasionally slipping and being like, that chick's hot. Look how hot that chick is. Like he did that with Tatiana and he did that with Brandt.
Discipline 007. Discipline.
But overall, Bond is there's still nothing in those 5 films that points at Bond being pussy over mission. He gets pussy on missions, but he never once sacrifices mission for pussy. Whereas with this, had the motherfucker just kept his dick in his pants, he would have gotten a little further on the Blofeld front. He's literally in the same building as the man he believes to be the Blofeld, and he's going around just trying to get his fucking rocks off and then gloating about how much the work is piling up.
I must see you.
8 o'clock tonight.
I must see you tonight.
9 o'clock. 10. Well, back to work. You've no idea how it's piling up.
Right?
So
I've always seen that scene though. I'm gonna
go ahead.
Yeah, you.
Yeah, that's fair.
Fuck yeah.
I made you cry.
I'm always
It's
gonna
only
go
fair.
against that. I think that whole bit, because it is the middle of the story. What are you laughing about?
Go ahead.
You hobbit-looking motherfucker.
Go ahead.
I've always seen that little bit, that side of the film, as, and again, I go deep in this fucking movie, but I always see that scene.
We have to go deeper.
You have to go deeper.
So
I always
does
see that
Lazenby.
bit of the film as almost like Bond's bachelor party. How does Bond go out if he's going to now be banging one chick? He has a slew of women from all different from all different countries, and yes, he only bangs 2 of them. But he is with a slew of women. Regardless of that is
What exactly?
slew of women.
So,
Wow.
okay, McCurdy, I have
Oh
I
my
have a
God.
pure, like, I'm going to lay out. I think
But
we
I-
should.
hold on, I wasn't
think we
finished.
should.
I wasn't.
get it.
I'm
What's your
talking.
point? What's your point? What's your
But
point?
my other point is that bit where, you know, he is banging all those chicks. I mean, he is also investigating. He's trying to figure out, okay, I know Blofeld's here. Blofeld's up to something. I have to find out what he is up to.
But he's
and
not
I've
focused on it
seen-
at all.
No, he is. I think he
He's
is.
completely. You could maybe argue that the scene with the first chick, he's actively bringing in information because he sees her being brainwashed. But that doesn't mean we had to have an entire sequence dedicated to him banging her. He could have been sleuthing around the place and found that out on his own, rather than. I mean, he goes back to his room and then he's got another fresh chick waiting for him to bang. And then after that, he seems solely focused on banging and not on
And-
Blofeld.
Surely he would have known, like, obviously they're monitoring these women 24/7. Like, they're watching them constantly. So he
Yeah.
had to have known that he would be blowing his cover by engaging with any of them for any amount of time.
They
and for
literally
any
have
reason.
AV stuff in every room. They at
Yes.
least have audio speakers in every room. Don't you think they're going to have cameras or microphones, you know? But he shows no regard for that.
I struggle with this movie, but I guess to preface, I obviously don't have a dog in the fight. This is my first time having seen this movie. First time having seen
Perfect.
pretty much any
tell
of
us
these movies.
Yes.
tell us everything.
Please tell us.
There's a lot to this, and I'll struggle to get it all out. But I'll start by saying I think I'm similar to Scott, somewhere in between Patterson and McCurdy, but I'm closer to Patterson. I'm gonna put it in the lower half for sure. While I agree, it's interesting to have like a different sort of Bond, and obviously the cinematography is great. The location is awesome.
I do love that location.
I find it lacking in a lot of ways too. And I don't know if it's just like new Bond, new director, new sort of Bond, or what, but it's probably just a combination of the things. It would have been interesting to have seen Connery in this role.
Absolutely.
And I guess to be the first to bring up the Craig movies in this episode, with
Get
the
your
Daniel
shot
Craig
right.
series, we get
You
the
must
arc.
drink.
Drink.
Yeah.
No,
I'll
and
drink.
I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna go off of what Nans is saying though, because you guys are gonna argue that like, no, he has ice in his veins all the time. He must have ice in the. And then you get to Casino Royale, and of course, we see another vulnerable Bond.
Hang on.
That's
Why
the
are we
other thing.
why are we
I don't
talking
give a
about
shit.
that?
No.
Why are we
Fuck you.
talking about that?
We're
No,
talking about it
talking-
because I want to make
we're
a point
talking
with your
about
argument.
these first 6 movies.
You're going to watch these first 6 movies, and then you're going to make the same argument. You're like, no, this movie is not as good because he doesn't have ice in his veins. And then we're going to get to the last
that's
5
not
movies.
why we are
We're going to
not
get to the last
saying-
5 movies, and
We
you're
are
going to
not
say...
saying that is why this movie's bad. It's not a bad thing to explore Bond as a character. What it comes down to is the merits of that exploration. And I would completely agree with Patterson that the whole Tracy aspect could be significantly better. And I'm willing to go through my whole play on how it could be right now. Nans, if you have anything more to add it now, and then I want to get into the movie.
Okay.
So we can talk that out. Because the last thing I would ever say is, well, because he cries, he's a big bitch. I do agree that James Bond should never fucking cry. That's just like, that should be in fucking stone. But to see into his past and see possibly why he's a cold ass motherfucker is a great thing. But and that's why there are a lot of there's some weird stuff in this movie in terms of the chronologically speaking. Like, why does he care so much about finding Blofeld? I get that for the last bunch of movies, Blofeld was behind everything, that maybe he would be so motivated. But it feels like it would be more appropriate that after Tracy was killed, that Bond would go through the stuff like, well, if you're not going to let me keep finding Blofeld, then I'm going to resign, motherfucker. You know, that would make more sense than with this. He's just like, well, it's kind of a must with me. Why? What the fuck has he been doing for 2 fucking years to try to find Blofeld? Apparently, he hasn't been doing dog shit, but driving around looking for random chicks trying to kill themselves in the ocean. That opening
that was
prologue
weird.
doesn't make sense unless you just go along with it just to go along for the ride. That's one thing, but I want to pivot to that. The first thing I want to talk about is the prologue. The first thing you notice is that there is a very important quality to these movies, just like any other superhero movie or like Indiana Jones, that it's important on how you reveal Bond. Bond revelations can be amazing or they can be kind of dull. This one's fun because, you know, we have, as an audience, have the knowledge that this is a new Bond. So in the beginning, they kind of shade him a bit. You don't fully see him. You just see little pieces of him. And that's fun, right? And
that
it's like,
stuff's fun,
it's like,
yeah.
we got new Bond, motherfucker. And so he's driving along, and he finds Tracy, and, you know, through rescuing her, we get our Bond, James Bond.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
That's all well and good, but overall with that prologue, besides, I mean, I think Patterson is correct. When I saw this movie as a kid, I thought that when he picked up her slippers and said this never happened to the other guy, I thought that was a Cinderella bit. As a kid, like when I saw this at 12.
Other people have made that distinction.
Yeah,
too.
I thought that's what
you're
it
not the only
was.
one who said that.
But seeing it now, it seems pretty clear that he's talking about Sean Connery, which I think is kind of lame. I don't know why they do that.
So a little backstory behind that is that
that's Peter Hunt being like, "I'm directing this now, motherfucker. I'm in the driver's seat." It's a little too.
Well, okay, so during filming, he was very arrogant about being the star of this film, because even Broccoli and Salzman were saying, no, you guys have to treat this guy, he's the star, he's the new James Bond, you guys have to treat him that way. And I think that got to his head. And so when he would use that to vie for more per diem, more better hotel rooms, all that kind of stuff. So he would always say, well, what was the other guy doing? What was the other guy doing? What did the other guy get? Oh, I get my per diem's 100. What was the other guy? So he would always say stuff like that. When they got to that scene, Hunt tells him, like, say that thing you say all the time. This never happened to the other guy. And so that's how it got stuck into the film. And I agree with you that it is
that's
a very
cute and all.
It's a very off-putting thing.
But not knowing any, I mean, that's like referencing the book. And I go, look, I haven't read the book. I just watched the fucking movie, and I draw conclusions from what I see and hear. And without, I mean, you're basically saying that there's required reading to figure out what that message means, as opposed to it just being a bad filmmaking move.
I mean, I don't disagree that this film, like, it has those shortcomings, but again, like, that's a part of the reason why I don't think it is necessarily the top, but I don't think it's the bottom. I really don't think it's the bottom.
And I
for
can
you
feel
to
that.
guys to say it's the below You Only Live Twice, I just think it's like you guys are overlooking a lot of stuff in this movie that I'm like, no, I don't think it's the bottom.
I don't think I would put it at the very, very
and I don't,
bottom.
and I do think it's better than Dr. No.
So, I mean, and again, like you said about like, well, this is Lazenby's first film and all that. It's like none of that behind the scenes stuff matters. All that matters is what ended up in the film and the film and the film alone, and no reading, no knowledge of behind the scenes. None of that matters.
Okay, you're moving the goalpost
or anything like that.
You're doing. Okay,
no, that's not moving the goalpost.
It is.
I'm saying that if you're arguing the merits of a movie, all that matters is the movie itself. Lazenby being a newbie, that doesn't matter. That's no fucking excuse for him not outshining Connery.
To speak to Bond specifically, I'm down for more depth of the character, but this seemed like a whole new Bond with like the breaking of the fourth wall. He's not good at his job, or at least it seems like that, because he's been ineffective on this mission for 2 years. He throws a little childish fit and quits his job. He blows his cover, to Blofeld. He just like he fails at a lot of different things, which just kind of, for me, makes the character fall apart and brings the movie down.
I think, Charlie, when you say, "Oh no, he's been dicking around for 2 years," I think you're looking at it wrong when you're saying that, because I do think that maybe that is just saying he's been at this for 2 years. And we already know that James Bond's an excellent spy. I mean, hell, he figured out where to find Domino based off his fucking photo where the bombs were because of his fucking sister. But I just think it's more of he's very frustrated. He always
weren't you
gets
the
his
one
man.
that said that was really shitty of
It
Thunderball?
was. I just think it's funny that I'm just saying I think that is funny. But what I'm saying is that I think his frustration is, and where you're like, well, why does he care so much to get Blofeld? Because he's been looking for this guy for 2 years. He's the head of Spectre. He's the best agent that they have. I think in his eyes, he thinks he's the best agent that they have. And he can't fucking find this guy in 2 years, when usually he can find these people within, a few days of getting the mission. So I think that adds to the frustration of when he gets into that scene and he's like, "You're off Operation Bedlam." He's like, "What the dude?" Like, I think that it adds to the frustration of him, and is like, "No, this."
I'm going to go on for a bit because I want to go into my fix for this movie. Like, if I were to remake this movie, this is where I would start with the prologue itself. I got to put that little piss thing over Scott. Looking for Blofeld and finding Teresa would have made for a better prologue. Instead, it's like, oh, Bond's out there looking for Blofeld, and then he's just driving. And a more, which is an odd thing to find Bond in a prologue not actively. I mean, we're right on the heels of You Only Live Twice with our big reveal of Blofeld finally seeing the head of Spectre. And then, I mean, they make it really personal, which I guess is fine because he finally found the head of Spectre. But instead of putting him in some active role, going and doing something, instead we just find him driving. So it's kind of odd, as opposed to him actively looking for Blofeld and just happening upon Tracy. So instead, my take would be, I mean, so you have 3 elements in this prologue. You have Blofeld, you have Draco, and you have Tracy. So how about something more along the lines of Bond is on a mission, perhaps to take down Draco, and maybe he gets captured or whatever and ends up in conversation with Draco. Bond then allies with Draco, revealing that he's actually just looking for Blofeld. He's looking for Draco, but he more so is his big picture aim is to get Blofeld. They ally together, and maybe this whole thing with you're going to marry my daughter is there or not. Maybe it's in the back of Draco's head. Who cares? Let's set that aside for a second. And essentially, we still do the lawyer stuff. We still establish that there's this Blofeld, this Blochamp wannabe sitting in an Alp in Switzerland. So what do we have there? We have an allergy clinic full of women, right? Let's say Draco then uses his own daughter to infiltrate Blofeld's allergy clinic. And then she, wanting to impress her father, is like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do this thing. And then he's going to send Bond along too. And she's like, I don't want this brute. And he's like, I don't want this useless dame. Like, they are at odds, right? Instead of just immediately being thrown in together into the love pit.
So you want to rival-mance them.
Yes, rival-mance. I fucking love it. So they both infiltrate this place concurrently, right? They're working together, but we establish that they don't like each other. She would then see him with other girls. Maybe after a while, she starts to get jealous. I mean, Bond is literally in Bond heaven. He's in a building chock full of women from around the world, and they're all babes, right? This is like Temptation 101 for Bond. In this movie, we see him give into that temptation, and it fucks him up. Instead, he's amongst all this temptation. He's in Bond heaven, and maybe he doesn't make good on it.
An opportunity to shine.
As they work together, they start to get a little closer.
Like maybe he's going to one of those bitches' bedrooms to hit it, and she walks by, and then he's like, never mind.
Or he goes to hit it, and the mind control thing happens, and like that interrupts him. So he ends up not doing it, but she thinks he did it, and she's maybe upset with him. Either way, maybe she starts falling under this mind control, starts to act weird. He's got to find a way to snap her out of it. Bond would then start to reject the other women, wanting Tracy instead, and then this would motivate that whole he's gay thing.
Of course, I know what he's allergic to.
You could spend a lot more time in the clinic allowing them to congeal and suddenly, you know, their feelings come to a head. Then they escape together. Then they end up in the barn, and that's where you really show this change in Bond, where he's like,
I know I'll never find another girl like you.
I was just in Bond heaven with a whole bunch of chicks in one building, and I could have banged all of them. But I gave all that up because I'm starting to see that you might be the beauty to my beast.
Yeah.
That's great, but that's not the movie.
That's not the movie, because the movie is inferior and it cuts through all of that and just says, f it, they're in love. Why are they in love? Why is Bond in love with her? Bond gets exactly what he wants. Yeah, there was a romantic montage.
And I don't care if your argument is, oh, they had a montage, so then they're in love. Like most movies do that. They show that they have time. I think that's the other thing with this movie. That's the other thing with this movie is we can talk about the runtime for this movie, right? Like this movie is 30 minutes longer than all the previous Bond movies. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they spend a lot of time on Tracy because they know that it's kind of a cliche in a lot of films where you spend a lot of time with the character that means they're probably going to die. And you see it in television shows all the time now. But this movie at least tries to spend that time where Bond realizes like, oh no, I actually like kind of see where this woman's coming from because I live in a crazy life. I have fucking ice in my veins. I fucking kill people for a living. And this woman is, I think, broken. She's as Patterson's put it, she's in the danger zone. But yes. I mean, Bond is also a dangerous person. I don't think he's not going to he's not going to fall for dangerous women. And she's definitely in the competent level. She's one of the better Bond girls that we see. She has her own action sequence in this entire film, which I don't think any of the other Bond girls got. We got Honey Rider with her knife. We got a little playful scene with Honor Blackman. What's her name in the second movie? She pushes the gun out of the way. Domino kills the bad guy. But this movie, we have a literal fight scene.
But notice what you just said, though. Domino uses a gun. Romanova, she also uses a gun. I'm going to go ahead and be the guy that says that if I fucking fought Gunther would kick my ass. Bond fought Gunther kicked his ass. You're telling me that Teresa fights Gunther and she manages to kill him? I'm going to go ahead and be that guy who says, no. I thought that Teresa's very
When does
smart.
wait? Hold on. Stand by. When did Gunther and Bond fight?
Bond and Gunther fought technically with two. It was Gunther and the other guy right when Blofeld was going to lock him away.
So there's two guys. It's not one guy. It's two guys.
But remember, Teresa
Two
took
guys
on two
and no
guys.
weapons. Two
Teresa
guys and no
took
weapons
on. Teresa
versus
took
one
on two
guy.
guys.
Tracy, one guy.
Tracy,
with
same
some
thing.
weapons.
She
Tracy
actually
took on
is
two
named
guys.
Teresa, but goes by Tracy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. She didn't shoot the guys. She hit one guy with a champagne bottle, threatened the other guy with it, and then he quickly disarmed her. And then she managed to powerhouse him down the stairs. What I'm saying is it would have been better for the character because Teresa is smart. She's very smart. She called out her dad in the beginning. She was like, hey, Dad, I know you're trying to hook me up with this guy. I know he's actually here for a mission. Just tell him about the lawyer so he can go away.
Tell him what he wants to know. Now.
In her driving scene, which James Bond would never let somebody else drive the car, just for the record, but okay, fine. He
It was a
lets her
cool
drive
scene.
the
I
car.
liked it.
Bond's useless. They didn't even have Bond do anything to help. He just fucking sat there in the passenger seat the whole time.
He kissed her on the cheek a couple times.
He did do that.
Yep.
He kissed her on the cheek a couple times. That's driving is Teresa again showing that she's quick of the mind. Driving isn't necessarily a strength thing; it's more of a mental thing, and she does great there. I really wish they would have justified her character by having her not brutalize Gunther, who's twice her size, but to use her brain. To use her brain to somehow, I don't know, make him fall down the steps and slam into those needle pads or something. Instead, she has a full-on brawl with him, and it's fucking bullshit. James Bond himself fought Gunther and lost. James Bond fought Teresa and he kicked her ass.
That is not what happened.
He kicked Teresa's ass.
That is
and
not
I know
what
it wasn't
happened.
life and death, but he still bested Teresa just one-on-one.
Charlie, I think that argument's garbage.
I want to give Ryan some credit.
Why is that garbage?
It's garbage because you are
Gunther should have smashed her fucking brains in like the mountain from
Charlie,
Game of Thrones.
To undermine you, I want to speak to McCurdy's point here because I do want to acknowledge.
Garbage.
I want to give McCurdy some credit here. I actually see it. I see why there would potentially be chemistry between Bond and Tracy. I get it.
Okay.
I actually acknowledge that McCurdy's point of saying this. If Bond was going to fall in love with a girl, I agree with him. I think it would be a girl like Tracy.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree.
I think because he
someone
loves
damaged like himself.
Someone damaged like himself. Someone who takes risks like himself.
Totally.
Like, hell, she's gambling at the beginning of the movie, and she like it makes sense.
To my point, Charlie, I think what I think is garbage is that you're just saying, oh no, Gunther should have kicked her ass. But again, like I said, Gunther and this other guy are holding Bond back. Isn't that correct? And I think like and it's in the midst of gunfights and stuff is when she's fighting this guy. And I'm even looking at it from
battle
like
over life and death.
Hold on.
So she's going to fight a little harder because it's life and death.
And I'm looking at from the perspective.
I'm
looking from the perspective
one-on-one,
of a movie.
Gunther should have ripped her fucking head off.
Overall, it does not fucking matter. What matters is the outcome of the movie and what is the movie supporting. What is the idea that this movie is supporting? The idea of the movie that is supporting is that Tracy is a fucking awesome chick.
There's no way that she could throw a 300-pound man into a wall enough to kill him. I'm saying it's a failure of character.
Scott,
I don't think it's a failure of character. I really don't. I honestly don't.
It's lazy.
I don't think it's lazy. I think this movie goes out of its fucking way to make Tracy a compelling character.
Dude,
this movie goes out of his
way.
Out of its way. It's not
She
lazy.
could have done something so much more fun.
Gunther
And it's lazy writing.
I don't think that's
lazy
I don't think
writing.
he's that big.
No, it's not, because you are showing that this character can best men bigger than her size. You're
Which
literally
is
saying that she is
stupid
awesome.
and
It's
lazy.
not fucking stupid unless you don't think women can kick men's
stupid
ass.
and lazy.
You are.
She didn't judo chop him. She didn't do any like
it was
Black
a fight,
Widow.
and you even said it a
she
second ago.
pulled
You
him
said
and
it's a
threw
fight
him
to
into
the
a
death.
wall.
It is a fight to
and
the
Gunther
death,
would have
and she is
fucking
fighting
blown her
for her
You're-
fucking
dude,
life.
You're doing the stupid ass progressive thing. Women can fight
I'm not even
men.
talking about the
She's
progressive
not
thing.
some trained killer. She's just a chick who is smart and can drive a car like a motherfucking G.
And
had
it's
they,
still an
had they
interesting
really
fight,
treated
and
the
we still
character
enjoy
well,
it,
they would
and
have
it's
had
a very
her
great
do
moment
something
in the film,
intelligent.
and that's what makes it good about the movie. It's
Something
a good point in the
intelligent
movie.
would have been better for the character. Instead, they got lazy and
think
just said,
you're
"Oh, she kicks his ass."
I
It's
wouldn't even call
stupid.
it he kicks his ass. I think
She should have shot him in the
bests
face. That would have been great.
She still bests
So-
him.
To actually,
She bests him because a lazy ass writer
I don't
just said, and
I
then
think
they
you're
fight
going on
and
and
she
on
wins.
about what single point in the film that's in. Like, it doesn't really matter. The point is that she bests
I'm
the
pretty
guy,
sure
but
at
she
the
doesn't
end
kick
she
his
breaks
ass.
his balance and swings him into the spikes. That's pretty smart.
Had he fallen down the steps and landed on that thing, that'd have been great.
How
That would
he
make
have
sense.
done that?
Instead, she swings him into it. Like
They're
a chick could
parallel to
pull
the
me.
stairs.
A chick could pull me, and I'm not as big
I
as
think
Gunther.
you're a little more
and
emotional
my-
about the fact that a woman and a man are fighting and she beats him.
But that's
No, that is what it is. That is what
Honestly,
it is.
yeah, I'm
gonna
And you think that is
stupid.
stupid.
yeah,
But
That
that's
is what it is. You are
stupid.
too emotional about a man and a woman fighting and a woman beating a man. She's not
She's
only
smart. She's not a
she's a capable
bodybuilder.
driver.
She's fucking smart.
She's a
But
capable
She didn't
driver.
run Gunther over
She
with
can
a car.
fucking fight
She
somebody else
brutalized
bigger
him in a
her
fight,
size.
which is stupid. That's insulting to her character. Her
It's not-
character isn't a fucking brute. Her character
She
is
wasn't
being
a
really
brute.
fucking street smart. She could have done something smart. Use her brain to kill him.
You just
not
don't think
literally
that women
throw
could
him
kick
into a
a
wall.
guy's ass.
She
You
literally
do not
throws
literally
him.
think that a woman could kick a guy's ass.
Not a 300-pound Gunther.
Oh, my, do I hate ad hominems. Well, welcome everybody to a PSA about how movies work. See, Tracy is a character in a film, not a real person, just like James Bond. A character, not a real person. Now, a character has established traits so that when they do things, you believe that those things were possible in the first place. Tracy manages to pull this off. Brutally murdering a, 250, 300-pound Swiss brute. Without any training in martial arts or anything like that. And you can claim that it was out of desperation, but plenty of people get fucking murdered against their will, generally. It would have been a lot better had she done something using her brain. Like, remember when McCurdy was all about this moment, where James Bond in Goldfinger, who was unable to beat Oddjob, a massive man, just like Gunther, pulled this move. Using his brain in order to beat Oddjob, and not just his brawn. Because it's more interesting for us as moviegoers. I'm going to go ahead and break my one rule. I'm going to go ahead and reference all future movies and all instances where women kick some ass in a way that's established early in the film and is believable, because generally they're assassins or CIA operatives, super spies, whatever it may be. Women kick ass in Bond movies all the time. And because I'm breaking my one rule, I'm going to chug this entire beer while y'all watch this short little video about women in the Bondverse kicking some ass. Cheers.
You think I've gone to heaven?
Not yet.
Okay, so what have we learned? Women in Bond movies can be badass. It's generally established ahead of time. Tracy, all that was established was that Bond could disarm her in 2 seconds and that her dad could give her a knockout punch. Didn't really sound all that badass when you add it up, but anyway, finished my beer, so get fucked.
I agree with McCurdy. I think she is a strong character. I agree with McCurdy. I think that their relationship makes sense in terms of there being attraction between them. The big thing for me that undermines the whole thing is that Bond went and banged 2 other chicks.
Yeah.
I think that's still in character because, again, earlier in the film, Tracy even says to Bond, or she says to her father, it's like, I'm not sure if he's in love with me or not.
Yeah.
And let me go. I'm going to go on for a little bit. Hold on. So she says that. She says, I'm not sure if he loves me. I think that I don't know if that's the exact line, but that's what she says to her father. Then we don't see Tracy for a good chunk of the movie, correct? And again, I'm going to go into the intellectual and analyzing this movie bit and say that, like I said before, I think that the middle part of the movie, as much as it is him going on his mission and trying to figure out Blofeld, in a way, it's also his bachelor party per se, because he doesn't really get one in this movie, of course.
I think you're giving him a pass.
Bond would give one.
I think you're giving him a real big pass there, dude. I think you're getting
hold on.
So
that's called headcanon. That's called headcanon.
It is headcanon. Okay, regardless if it's headcanon or not, he doesn't. Okay, he goes in, he bangs a bunch of chicks. I think that's in character for Bond, right? He's done it in other movies. He goes and he meets the main Bond chick, and then he still fucks somebody else, and then he comes back to the other chick. What I think is great about it is that after he's had all these shenanigans, all these women, and even the women he's having sex with aren't that great to begin with. I mean, the fucking chicken lady is kind of slightly obnoxious. Even after he has sex,
obnoxious.
She's slightly obnoxious. Even after he has sex with her and everything, and then he goes down the mountain, and we have that great, awesome ski sequence, and he's getting chased down, and we have all this moment. He's like, I could get killed, and he's like, I don't know what I'm gonna fucking do. They're after me. They're gaining in on me, and who comes to his rescue? It's Tracy, and it's in a great, glorious shot where the first thing we see is her feet, and it comes up. It's almost like, and I'm gonna get whatever analytical or be the film snob.
Very curious thing, snobbery.
But it looks like she's very angelic in those scenes. And I also add that a lot of her shots.
I do like that scene.
A lot of her shots in this movie, if you notice, they have a very much a glow. Like I think people have talked about like putting Vaseline on the fucking Vaseline on the lens type thing. But
the Barbara
and I know
Walters
that doesn't
interview.
necessarily add to my argument. But I just want to point out that is something that I love about this movie. And to me, when, she saves him, and not only does she get him out of the bad situation, she's a fucking competent as driver. She best even the fucking Italian driver, or the Swiss drivers in the ring when they're driving around, and they're like, how the fuck do we get out of here? And it's a fucking road rally, right? Like there are tons of cars, and she's still like outbest the bad guys, even the people in the cars.
Like I said, she proves time and again that she's very intelligent.
I'm trying to state the middle ground here between McCurdy and Patterson, because I fully agree with Patterson in that the fact that he sleeps with two random women in the middle just seems very convenient for them to try and plug the point that he's still Bond. Like, look, he's still just trying to fuck everything. It just doesn't make sense in a love story. But I'm going to agree with McCurdy in the fact that I think they make sense together. From the very beginning, she's mysterious. He's trying to figure it out. They make love. She pays off her debts. 20,000 francs in the desk. And he's like, no shit, and paid in full.
20,000 francs is a lot of money. Paid in full as well.
That's different for him. I think Bond's falling in love with her throughout the film. Different bits and pieces. I know there's a love montage in the middle. That's a bit much. That shouldn't have been there.
That montage should have been later in the film.
Yes.
In the film.
Yeah. It should have been after he does the whole allergy clinic thing.
Yeah, exactly. It should have been after they survived, right before they got married.
But then we reach the driving scene, and I think that, as McCurdy said, like, God damn it. And then he keeps kissing her, like, God damn, she's a badass right now. Yeah. He whispers, like, good girl. Like, he's falling in love with her throughout. It's not in the beginning. He's not going to be pawned off or won for $1 million. He's not doing it for that.
The timing of when he sleeps with those women screws up.
It's terrible.
It undermines the relationship dramatically.
Fully.
And if your point is also in this movie that this is a good movie because Bond is being more vulnerable and being more emotional, let me tell you something about being vulnerable and emotional. If you're falling in love with somebody, you're not going to want to sleep with somebody else.
Correct.
Like if you haven't figured out your feelings for somebody else, like if you're developing these feelings, especially if they're new to you, you're not going to be like, let me immediately go and fuck this all up. Like he would need time to evaluate it. It undermines both the vulnerable and emotional Bond angle, and it undermines their relationship. It's just
unless he's having cold feet and he's just like, I could fuck a couple of chicks, not talk about it, and then move on.
Which he is the whole time, the whole movie. And let's get into the Bond's motivation, right? Because I think Patterson and I agree that Bond's motivation doesn't make any fucking sense.
And
Where he's going after Blofeld.
Yes. Why does Bond give this much of a fuck about Blofeld? Obviously, after this movie, it makes a ton of sense for why Bond is like, I'm out
and
to get
again,
Blofeld.
I said this before, but I'll restate what I said. That it's been 2 years. Again, like Bond always seems to get his man fairly quickly, usually. And also on top of that, like the last 5 movies or at least, 4 of the last 5 movies, let me correct that, have established that there's this organization that is Spectre that is basically his true enemy. And the leader, the head of this enemy, the head of this squid is Blofeld. And so for him to
That's
not
all
be
well
able-
and good, but then entered Bond in this movie, and he's not doing a goddamn thing about it. He just so happens upon Draco.
Basta!
And Blofeld sucks a huge, fat, nasty turd out of a stanky butthole in terms
You think
of being
Blofeld
a good...
sucks?
In this
I
movie,
think this Blofeld's better.
Please go
Blofeld's
into
much
that because okay, Patterson. Let me ask you this question to start you off.
Sure.
Better or worse than You Only Live Twice? Remember, spectrum-wise, You Only Live Twice. This end of the spectrum.
So
actually, no. Sorry, You Only Live Twice is in the middle of the spectrum. Over here is Blofeld pre You Only Live Twice, which is the man in the chair who never gets emotional. Then over here we have a guy who's front and center, and you see his face the whole time, and he's a character, and he exchanges words with Bond, and
I'm
there's
still
a
going
little
to say I'm going to
subterfuge
say
and all that.
worse. I'm still going to say worse. I'm going to say
Please
he's
go
worse
into
in this
that.
movie. So first of all, I think mystery suits Blofeld well.
Totally.
I think bringing him to the forefront is actually bad for his character. And this was on my list of sins, and this is honestly to me like the most offensive part about the film. His motive for doing this makes no sense at all. No sense. If he gets what he wants, he's way more screwed than he it actually makes his position worse. Like his plot will make his life worse than it currently is.
And so you're saying that if he gets what he wants, he can retire in like a public view, essentially?
Okay, look, what is it that he wants in this movie? He wants amnesty. He wants total amnesty for all his crimes. And he wants to be recognized as the count of whatever the fuck. Right? That's the two things he asks for. He actually doesn't even ask for any material gain. He just wants 2 like worldwide acknowledgments. Correct or incorrect?
Yeah, there's no money involved, right? There's no.
So let's.
We can assume that he's already rich, I guess.
So
and he just wants to get away with his money.
Now let's dig down into that. Let's say that he succeeds and they give him what he wants. You still threatened every single human being on the planet by making like you. So even if you face no criminal trials whatsoever, everybody's going to be like, you're that asshole who threatened to kill everybody on the planet. That's number 1. Number 2,
I have one argument to that point. Quick, Patterson, if I can't. Nobody knows him. Nobody knows who he is. He's the head of a secret organization.
Patterson, the first argument to that point, though, is that you say that every government would be against him, but this movie already establishes that the governments in this movie follow the rules, and Bond doesn't like that to begin with.
Which I agree with. I think that if he got his way, I'm not exactly sure that he wouldn't get away with it. I think legally you would need Bond to then break the law and do vigilante justice and go kill him. But I think governments would respect any mandate for fuck it. The governments let bad guys get away with shit all the time. They're not going to give a fuck as long as the sun rises the next day. Bond might go do some vigilante shit.
Yeah, but and then on top of that point, though, is that the brilliance of this is that now that even if he doesn't pull shit and he's like, well, now I have amnesty, and he still pulls the trigger on his actions. Well, now in the previous films, he's even talking about this is headcanon, give or take, but he's always talking about, oh, there will be a new world order, and I imagine at least the last film that would be Spectre.
He never asks to be put in control of shit.
But he's put in the position now that if he has amnesty and he does pull shit, that now he has legitimacy to be like, no, I'm now the ruler of the world.
Look,
And that's far fetched, but I don't think he's in a worse position. I think he's putting himself out of the game in a good position. And again, I think that also goes with the theme of the story, where he is.
I want to argue
as,
that this is the worst Blofeld.
I don't think that at all.
Go ahead.
Please talk, Dans. I want to hear it.
Don't think so.
I think we stated in You Only Live Twice that we prefer the mysterious Blofeld. We don't necessarily want to see him. We want him to be the head of the organization. And while I liked the character design, mostly just the scar on Blofeld and You Only Live Twice, and I did think like the actor did well in this movie, I just thought the whole Blofeld plot didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, I think one of you guys mentioned it at the beginning of the episode. Why wouldn't he just get number 2?
Yeah, why wouldn't he just send his
like,
Spectre dudes to do this job?
Yeah. Why would he put it under the guise of an allergy clinic? Why would the clinic be at the top of a mountain in a town that's surrounded by skiers on vacation? Like,
it's not a discrete
and he's
location.
skiing down the mountain.
Let me argue that first point. And I know you guys were like, well, why didn't you get Spectre agents? We've seen in previous movies that Spectre agents aren't always reliable. They do stuff that he ends up finding out about.
Are they less reliable than random hot chicks from around the world?
Yeah, you just brainwashed all these random women's. There's no way they're more reliable.
But I think these guys are right, though, McCurdy, that Blofeld could just as easily have paid a couple of guys $20.
I'm going to start a clinic to help people with their allergies.
I think it's an interesting story. I think the clinic's a lot of fun. I'm certainly not against the clinic solely because it's fun. But Patterson is right that you could find a bunch of homeless dudes and just be like, hey, go spray this shit in Zurich.
And they're not going to care.
But I think also that also goes in ties with the fear of, these women go out, they go to their respected countries. And how are we supposed to find all of these? I mean, Bond's like, well, if we destroy the source of the radio signal and all this stuff, then we can stop this whole thing from happening. But the fact that you have these, 12 gorgeous women out in these various different countries, and you have to, track down each one of them, and they have no idea what is going on themselves. I think that's scarier to me, because then you don't.
Once you start
versus
let's think of it though. Once you start
paying
spraying, though, like if it was like, hey, all of you chicks have this super AIDS and I need you to start banging everybody and that'll spread the super AIDS, that would make sense. But instead, they just have a spray bottle and they're just going to spray the spray bottle. And once they start spraying the spray bottle, couldn't anybody do that?
It makes it fucking scarier to not be like, well, we have to listen to Blofeld now because we don't know who these women are. I mean, Blonde knows.
But if they were Spectre agents, they would be anonymous as well.
I've already established why he doesn't use Spectre agents, because we know they're not always reliable. They do dumb stuff, and
these women are more reliable.
I still don't think a brainwashed woman is more reliable.
Women that he can
brainwash control. The number dudes.
Brainwash your own Spectre people. I mean, essentially, that's what he did.
You can easily get them into the same room and then flash some lights in their face.
And not only would it make more sense to just brainwash your own Spectre agents if you really have to brainwash them to make sure that nobody knows who they are, gorgeous women are going to attract attention. That's what they do. A Spectre agent is just an ugly dude.
Give super AIDS to a bunch of hot chicks and be like, I'm going to have my hot chicks go bang everybody in the world and spread super AIDS. And then imagine a worse enemy for James Bond than super AIDS.
I think it makes more sense to hire someone with a rank or access to water supply.
Yeah,
or
then why not kidnap a bunch of military officers and brainwash them? Yeah. If you were about the access, then why didn't you do that?
If you have to brainwash people, why not hijack them instead of creating a clinic that helps people with their allergies so some chick can eat chicken?
Right.
What's the whole point of all of that?
I think that has linked to more to the figuring out how to create this infertility virus than just what it was going on. But Charlie, you had a point.
Well, so if I play devil's advocate, I will say that McCurdy's right so far as hypnotizing these chicks to do his bidding to then spread the virus is perfectly fine. Patterson's point is why take all that time and effort to build this clinic and have this whole, whatever, your subterfuge that you're a doctor and all this shit? Why go through all that instead of just developing the virus and just going straight to delivery? Hey, I'm going to unleash this virus on the world unless you pay me or give me amnesty or whatever. Presumably, it takes him years to
It's like
solve
he added
this,
like 8 steps.
this allergy problem in order to do this.
And it's not like the allergy front really needs, like, it doesn't protect
Yeah.
him from anything, really. Like, there's no point in setting up this entire front operation to, like, it's not like he goes to the world governments and tells them what he does. Like, there was no point in the secrecy.
It was just a ploy to have a bunch of hot chicks in the movie.
And last time, his goal was global destruction by making Russia and the U.S. go to war with each other, and he almost pulled it off.
This leads to my point about his motive. If he wanted to get all of his crimes erased and basically get an agreement from all the world governments for them to just be like, okay, hands off, we won't touch you, like, fine, like, you win, and then he disappeared into the shadows, that would be an okay motive. But that's not what he does. He says, I want you to do that, but then I also want a noble title, which is going to highlight me in society.
But
Like,
again, I think I'm okay.
why-
I'm okay with that because we have billionaires all the time that get off the hook for doing shady insider trading shit. And then the government's like, you can survive.
I think that's Patterson,
I think they would
it's an
just
ego
let
play.
Blofeld, like, hey,
I still
Blofeld,
think it's an ego
you're not
play.
going to try to take over the world anymore, Dr. Evil. We'll leave you alone.
So, okay.
We'll leave you alone.
Okay, I
and you're
think it's
not
an
even
ego
asking
play.
for money this time.
And I just also want to add, I think Telly Savalas, like, if we're comparing two actors, I think he does a better performance than Donald Pleasance does.
So-
I think
100%.
Donald Pleasance
No,
is
yeah.
just a better,
Definitely.
and he's
I'll agree
just
with
a
that.
better
Great job.
villain in
I'll
general
agree.
by being a more active, involved villain who actually fights Bond, which we don't even. I think this is the one time we actually see Bond and Blofeld actually go toe to toe.
And I like when he
together.
triggers the avalanche. I think that was cool, and that's legit.
Yeah.
That is a
Well,
good
and
villain
McCurdy,
move.
to your point, I like that it's not toe to toe so far as like a punch for punch.
Yeah,
But they kind of, because Blofeld's just like a fat dude who's used to a sedentary lifestyle, sitting around telling other people what to do. I don't think he could best Bond. As much as Gunther should have kicked Teresa's ass, I don't think Blofeld had a chance against Bond. Instead, they kind of put Bond at a disadvantage with this whole. I mean,
on
it's
the
kind of
bobsled
when you
and all that
really
stuff.
look at it from like an eagle's eye view. The bobsled thing might be goofy, but I still think it works. I still think it's suitable so long as like Blofeld's trying to get away, and that it puts Bond at a disadvantage where he has to chase him, where Blofeld could have gotten away.
If we're judging, like I'm saying, if we're judging this movie in comparison to the other films,
Which is
especially
what we're
the
doing.
fact
That's
that
literally the point of the podcast.
if we're judging it compared to the other films, and you're talking about great fight scenes and stuff, that's a great fight in between him and Blofeld on the bobsled. But I don't think him and Largo have a great fight. I don't think him and Blofeld don't even have a great fight in the last movie.
They don't even have a fight. This movie kind of pretends like You Only Live Twice never happened.
To some degree.
And that's the
little bit,
point
yeah.
Patterson made, is that they finally meet face to face. I would much rather have You Only Live Twice never happened, or at least had hidden Blofeld. And then that would lead to this, where Peter Hunt says, okay, how about this? Instead of just some cheap reveal of Blofeld, let's actually have him out in the open the whole time, but we don't know it's him. Until, we have the whole cat and the bald head and the weird jumpsuit, but let's slowly let it release until Blofeld finally fucking takes that mask off, and he was hiding in plain sight the whole time.
Like, if I was going to rewrite, like, Charlie, I like your idea for rewriting this film to make the relationship between Bond and Tracy better. If I was going to do the rewrite, it would be changing Blofeld and making him a much, again, like, consistent with what he was in the previous films, a shadowy puppet master who is very intelligent and has a coherent and, sensical even plan, who also knows how to leverage the resources of Spectre to cause chaos and mayhem throughout the world. And this Blofeld does not do that. He does not do any of those things well. And that's why I don't like him as a villain. I don't think he does those things well.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I do think there is a little bit. I mean, you could say this is fucking headcanon again, but I think there's a little bit of the idea that Spectre is. You and your fucking headcanons.
You and your fucking headcanons.
Yeah, fucking head. Hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm not done.
But your headcanon.
I'm not done.
Please justify your headcanon. If it's bullshit, we'll call it bullshit. I want to hear more about Patterson, why he thinks what he thinks. Why does he think that Blofeld isn't doing some whatever the fuck you just said?
I do think that this movie, in a weird way, especially after You Only Live Twice, it's like Spectre kind of fades from existence, and I don't want to speculate if that's a Thunderball rights issue or not, but it is very acknowledgeable, especially in the last movie. After the last movie, we don't get any more scenes of other Spectre. There's no other Spectre agents in this movie. There's no, and yeah, you could say, oh, Irma Blunt is another Spectre agent. We never hear her called her as number 1 or number 11.
Which, by the way, she's technically the one who pulled the trigger on Tracy's death.
Yeah,
and yet we never see her again. You know, Bond.
Yeah.
Bond never takes care of Bunt. But anyway, go on.
But yeah, there's never. So there's almost like this idea that Spectre, in a weird way, is dismantled, but Blofeld is still out there.
I feel that. That's why he wants to retire almost. It's like his last ditch effort. And this is where I will agree with you, McCurdy. Let's say that Spectre had its big day, right? Where we almost ended the world, and then it ended with only Blofeld getting away from the volcano layer, and then he like Sauron scampers away to regroup. He ends up using the last of his funds to establish this allergy clinic, and then he weaponizes some chicks on his side by hypnotizing them. I can believe all that. I can totally get behind all of that. And then his motivation is that I've been bested and I just want to be left alone. But why couldn't he just stay in hiding? Instead, he called attention to himself that literally brought Bond to him. He could have disappeared forever. He could have retired to some fucking island somewhere. Instead, he had to manufacture this whole thing.
Is this 100% a sequel to You Only Live Twice?
No.
I guess that's a question I have.
It's supposed to be.
Are we supposed to take each movie as an individual little story?
They make it quite clear that this is a sequel. They make it that not only do they show all the movies in the prologue, but then we have that cute little scene where Bond plays with his old toys. For some reason, he has Honey Rider's belt. Who knows why he had? I mean, Honey Rider's out there without a knife. We have the watch from Russia with Love. We have the Thunderball breather, and then we have the janitor whistling the Goldfinger tune. We have all these references to all the movies beforehand, except for You Only Live Twice. It's like there's no reference to that movie.
No, that's not true because they do show it in the trailer.
They show it in the prologue, but they don't make a reference. They do not. Bond never puts on a Japanese wig and pretends that he's Yakuza or whatever the.
Yeah, that would have been funny.
I actually think it's disappointing that they make Spectre so toothless going. I'm disappointed to hear that because, like, to me, that was what was intimidating about both Spectre and Blofeld. Like, was it not the whole point of Spectre that they're like, they could be anywhere at any time, they could strike from the shadows and retreat, and you wouldn't be able to expect it? Which again is like why I'm like, why didn't he use the Spectre agents to do this plan? Because I thought that was the whole point of Spectre, was that you are a Spectre is a ghost. It is something that could easily just slip into your room and with you and then slip right back out.
Spectre is representative of eternal chaos. Eternal chaos. Right. That there is always this evil element hidden out there. And just like Hydra cut one head off and two spring up to replace it. That's what Spectre is. Spectre is eternal.
I think that this film tries to fix the one of the problems with the last film, which we did notice, is like now that the mask is off, essentially, of Blofeld, he's not as interesting, and they didn't know what to do with him to make him more interesting. And at least this film does a fair job in trying to make him more, like you've said, Charlie. He's more of a character.
Be a Spectre thing.
I agree with that.
Like then never use the word Spectre in this movie and just make it about Blofeld and his quest for vengeance and maybe
sure.
I agree with Patterson that they reduce Blofeld from leader of Spectre to number 1, and he's just like acting as just an agent of Spectre, not the leader of Spectre.
Yeah, Spectre. The scene we didn't see was when Spectre all had a vote to get rid of their leader, and Blofeld's on the outs. He's no longer part of Spectre, and now he's on his own, right? And without Spectre to protect him, now he has to figure out a way to get amnesty. That actually would have been really fucking interesting in the wake of You Only Live Twice.
And that would have made sense for why he would come up with this elaborate brainwash these women
completely plan. Because Blofeld suddenly doesn't have Spectre anymore. Right. Jesus Christ, we're going to rewrite this fucking movie and make it significantly better. We're going to make the Bond Tracy thing actually make sense, where Bond is motivated to fall in love with her rather than just have a romantic montage. And we're going to fucking fix Blofeld from just having this elaborate scheme that doesn't make sense if he still has all the resources of Spectre behind him, but instead we separate him from Spectre, and then boom, we motivate everything he does.
Patterson, I completely agree with you in the fact that he opened his door to England essentially just because he wanted a title. Like, he just wanted to be called Count, that's just bullshit.
It's just dumb. And look,
that was, I don't get that point at all.
The whole
you're
thing,
the head of Spectre.
The whole thing about me saying this movie is last is because we're sitting here right now talking about all the stuff this film could have done differently to make it better.
Yeah.
That is my point. That is why I rank it last. That is why it's number 6 on my list, because there's just so many things that it could have done better that were simple even. Like, it would have been so simple to just not have Bond interact with Blofeld until much later in the film, and then him have that moment of recognition, like, oh shit, you're Bond. Like, instead of him stupidly having this whole undercover thing, and then he figured, like, why have that continuity error?
That honestly, that would have made sense because he thinks that this Hilly guy is just going to show up. So maybe because he's a badass, he's like, oh, I don't need to meet with this guy face to face. I'm too busy. Maybe Bond thinks I cannot meet with him face to face because we literally just had a face to face for the first time. And so Bond avoids him. Blofeld's too busy or whatever, but then eventually they have to meet. Or prefers to
work in the shadows.
I actually recognize you. I mean, and Bond put on some glasses. He thought he could take the Superman approach and just wear some glasses and a hat, and that Blofeld wouldn't recognize him. But like, what were the producers just like? Was it literally the Michael Bay like, fuck it? Like, was it literally just like, fuck it? We're never gonna justify why they don't recognize each other or why Blofeld suddenly doesn't have a scar. Did Peter Hunt just say, I don't give a shit? I mean, they make such a point to show that this is indeed a sequel, but then they don't justify You Only Live Twice, which makes me think that they just wanted to disregard that movie entirely.
In the Bond playbook, the franchise playbook, is if the films go too fantastical or too big, the next film goes low key. And this movie actually is very low key. I mean, there's Bond barely uses any gadgets in this movie. There are some, but like not in the comparison.
He makes a gadget. He breaks an eraser in half. He puts a ruler piece of metal between it, and then he clips it. Okay, he didn't need no fucking cue to figure out how to open that door. Okay,
but what I'm saying is that he uses his smarts versus using gadgets. Yeah. So the idea was that
I do want to go ahead and say that Radioactive Lint is so fucking.
But that's
stupid,
a tongue-in-cheek joke, right?
It's so
Radioactive Lint would just kill you, wouldn't it? Like, would you just get
over time?
Isn't that a good way to kill somebody?
And it's just like who doesn't reach into their pocket and flick out some lint occasionally?
Totally, yeah.
Just completely
you shove it in that guy's belly button and hope he doesn't shower.
Hold on, guys. When is the lint used?
That's a joke.
In the film,
I'm
other
pretty
than
sure
it's
the
just
lint is a
mentioned.
joke.
They don't actually use it.
They don't
It's
actually
another
use it,
reason
right?
why the prologue is wasted. The prologue is totally wasted on a stupid scene between Q and M that just says, "Where's Bond? He's supposed to be looking for Blofeld." And then Bond is combing the beach for suicidal chicks instead of looking for Blofeld. That's why I'm saying that
combing the beach. He just so happens upon her, which I don't think.
Why? What the fuck was he doing?
The prologue should have been an explanation of what he had been doing for those 2 years.
Better justification for it, though, would have made it a little cleaner.
The movie
rather than
is
Bond
not
just
about that. The
Okay,
movie-
wait. So you're telling me that Bond just so happens to find a chick who's the daughter of a big criminal organization with connections to Blofeld?
You told me in the beginning of the film.
It seems like he's following her.
McCurdy, I'm saying you're a hypocrite if
I'm
you
not
think
a hypocrite.
that's less convenient.
Why am I a hypocrite?
Because you were all about Thunderball being having all these
too
plot
many times.
conveniences.
I even
and
said in that
now
episode,
you're saying that those are fine.
I said in that episode that I can buy one convenience, okay? And that convenience is that he so happens upon the fact that he's in the fucking spa with the Spectre agent. That is a convenience that I can buy because it's the beginning of the movie. I'm like, that is how a story happens. It just so happens that this fucking happens. That is what is called that is the inciting incident of the fucking movie, and I can.
You're saying that for 2 years, Bond has been looking for Blofeld and has come up with jack shit, and then one day he's driving along, and this chick he finds directly leads him to Blofeld.
It's the inciting incident of the movie, and I said before I can
buy
one
little
convenience in the
justification
movie.
would have gone a long way.
I can buy one convenience in the movie.
I somewhat agree with Char. But for me, he's following her to the beach.
Yeah.
But the prologue should have been showing us what he's been doing the last 2 years and why he's following her.
Yeah.
If he could have been placed on a mission against Draco that led or against Blofeld, either one that led him.
You're using a movie that doesn't exist to say that this movie sucks, but it doesn't.
I'm using it to illustrate a point, which is that the prologue of this movie is lazy.
Charlie's trying to argue with McCurdy to say, McCurdy, are you saying this cannot be improved?
Here's my thing about the movie that I like things I will acknowledge that suck about this movie or I wish were better, right? We've already established that the fact, and a lot of people point this out, this is one of the biggest things, is that Bond and Blofeld don't recognize each other, right? Like, that's one of the biggest things that is one of the issues of this film. And I'm going to bring out some trivia and say that, like, they had thought that originally. They were like, well, maybe we can explain it that Bond got plastic surgery, right? Like, they could have said that, but I think that would have made the movie sillier if they had done that. So they just said, F it, we're just going to go. It was like a F it situation. They were like, we're not going to do that.
I can accept that.
Patterson, I recognize the thing that you said in the beginning about the movie where, you know, he acknowledges the camera and breaks the fourth wall. At the time, it probably worked for audiences, but now it just seems a very strange thing.
I kind of imagined that, like, breaking the fourth wall was like a thing back then that, like, isn't as cliche as it is now. Like, I can't imagine that, like, 50 years of cinema hasn't just, like, beaten that into a completely dead horse. But
to touch on what Patterson's saying of the time too, like him falling for Tracy, but then having sex with other women. This is like right after the Summer of Love, right? So it's just like that's just how it was.
I said this before. Tracy even points out, I don't know if he's in love with me or not.
Yeah, but But McCurdy, that's our point. Our point is that he doesn't love her. Our whole point is that it's this fake love.
I think Nance's point is the best made of the night, which is that, like, this just happened during the Summer of Love, and, like, that would have been a thing in the 1969.
They'd explain the clothing too.
Yeah,
they're ridiculously see-through white shirts.
But that doesn't back up why he falls in love with her, or why they have a romantic montage when Bond already got the information he needed to go find Blofeld. He should have been like, "Hey, thanks, peace." Why is he so drawn to Tracy? Why?
We established this. That
why
she is broken. He is broken.
So what?
And they see eye to eye on that.
Damaged, bro. I mean,
but here's the thing.
Honey Rider was raped.
The beginning of the film.
And Bond banged her and then immediately got rid of her. Why does he care about Tracy?
I think, here's the other thing I think about this movie, right? So this movie, I like I said in the beginning, the theme of this movie is his struggle between his job and his own personal life, which could equal Tracy, right?
Sure.
But Tracy, you can make that analogy with Tracy. Tracy is trying to deal with her own life. She wants to break away from her father's shadow. She doesn't want to be the daughter of this basically the head of this mafia criminal syndicate in Europe. She doesn't want to be that. She's constantly followed by these men who are protecting her from, you know, other men and all this stuff. And she does all these reckless things, but she is tired of the fact that her father is interfering with all of her life.
But there's not that much similarity there, because that's a role she's inheriting, whereas Bond chooses to be an agent. Bond has a choice, and she feels like she doesn't. Like, Bond can walk away from being a secret agent anytime he wants. In fact, he literally tries to do that in this movie, is walk away from his fucking job.
That, to me, again, is the tragedy of this movie, is he does
but
that.
I'm saying like that wouldn't be a relatable point between those two. They wouldn't get like that wouldn't be something where they bond over because they have a different experience with it. If Bond was an indentured servant and had to serve as a secret agent, if he was obligated to do so out of some sort of bond, like maybe his father was a secret agent and he feels like he has to carry on the family lineage, that would be something he and Tracy could bond over. But Bond literally has a part in this film where he's like, I'm down to walk away from this right now. Like, this is bullshit. I don't want to do it anymore. Tracy's life experience is not like that. That's not something they would relate to each other over or bond over because they don't have.
Charlie threw down the gauntlet early on in this whole show, right? He had even said that what matters to him is good story. And that's what this movie has in spades, is a good story. I know there are weird plot things that you guys think are weird. I don't necessarily think as weird as they are. And in contention to that, that's why I don't think it is necessarily higher than Goldfinger or From Russia with Love. But I definitely do think it is better than You Only Live Twice, Thunderball, and Dr. No because of its strong points.
That is fair. Let us discuss ranks at this time. So, Nans, I believe you didn't actually give us your numerical rank, but after much discussion, please share with us your numerical rank for this film.
Coming into the beginning of this episode, I was somewhere between it's either above or below Thunderball. At this point, I'm taking it a step lower even and putting it either above or below You Only Live Twice. And I'm not quite sure where.
You have to, like the points
if I
you
had
have to
to
decide.
right now.
Yes, that's what I'm asking you to do.
I'm gonna put it
Just make
above,
a decision.
I'm gonna put it above You Only Live Twice.
So your official order is, and I correct me if I'm wrong. Goldfinger, number 1.
From Russia with Love, Dr. No, Thunderball,
On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then
You Only Live Twice. Okay. Yeah. Scott, do you maintain your rank?
Yeah, I think we settled. I think I'm about where Nans was. When I came in, I stated this was either 4th or 5th. I don't think it's better than Dr. No. So I had this between 4 to last. And actually I never thought it was last. So with the points made, that there's been a lot of solid argument here. On your side, Charlie's points. I'm still, I think, somewhat on McCurdy's side, that I actually enjoy an emotionally driven Bond, and that weakness showing a true side of a man. You know, if you look at a soldier, some of the strongest people, in our society, they have battles behind scenes. And I think this is just us seeing Bond come around after, 5 hard movies, and like, fuck, maybe I do want to settle down. Maybe I want to get away. Maybe I'm tired of this, Mm-hmm. But I can't put it at 4th anymore. I think Thunderball's better, so I'm going to put it at 5th, ahead of You Only Live Twice.
So,
and I get that. I get the temptation to be like, wow, we're seeing shades of Bond by having him, become more human and all that. I get that. That's why I say, what's your cup of tea? And
right.
I think that, you bring up soldiers of old. Yes, they struggle with some crazy shit happened overseas during the war and all that. But generations of old would fucking swallow that shit and be a goddamn man. And I respect that in a character who's supposed to show the way, rather than, the whole approach of like, if you're going to cry, go find a fucking closet somewhere and cry. That, I think, defines manhood. Crying is totally natural. We all do it. It's good. But Bond crying is not being a capable fucking badass dude who leads the way. I am always going to be more on the side of the Bond who is capable. Because the guy who loses himself to emotion is going to get fucking killed. The guy in the foxhole is like, oh my God, we're going to die. He's going to get fucking killed, and he's going to get people killed with him. That's why soldiers beat each other up so much to make sure that they can fucking hold themselves together when shit hits the fan.
For my ranking, I'm going to maintain. I'm still like, again, this is my personal opinion, so I'm going to maintain that it belongs at last. But I'm willing to accept it being in 5th place, and the reason why is because a lot of the points that I made about this movie, in terms of it having a poorly structured plot and having a lack of a lot of sense to it, don't all those points also apply to You Only Live Twice. Like that's just true. It's a fact. I'm going to concede that, and I'm also willing. I would say, like, ironically, I feel like I pulled Scott and Nance down the list, but I will say I'd actually say McCurdy has succeeded in me thinking that it deserves to be higher, because I get his points. I think it is strong in its story.
We're coming together.
We have come together.
We're coming together.
Let's all cry now.
Yeah, together.
I will throw this out there, though, that I don't think at any point in this movie does Bond cry, and he doesn't even cry at the end. He gets emotional.
Well, I never said he did.
Yeah.
But you're saying that, like...
But and if a man is going to cry, it's going to be when his new wife just got shot in the face in front of him. Trust me. I actually am a big fan of the end of this movie, especially after every fucking movie before this ending the same goddamn way with sex on a boat or a life raft. It's like Peter Hunt was like, hey, what's the big ending to this movie? And they're like, once again, Bond gets laid on a life raft. And he's like, what the fuck? I'm going the opposite way. I'm going to have Bond get married and then have her get killed.
And I think I'm going to go ahead and formally submit that is our ranking. And Charlie, we haven't actually heard your rank yet. What is your rank? I want to hear what your rank is.
There is no way in hell that this movie is better than Dr. No. There's just no justifying it being... Go back and watch Dr. No again, and you'll be like, fuck it. Dr. No is untouchable so far as it's perfect in its simplicity. It's probably closest to perfection that we've gotten to. It's just such a small movie that it's easily overshadowed. That's why 2 and 3 went above it.
I agree. I agree completely.
And then Thunderball, we all agreed Thunderball could have been number 1, but it's like they just ignored the story portion and they just went all out. And that's where I keep saying its reach exceeded its grasp. And then You Only Live Twice just felt... After that big, powerful Thunderball, it felt a little more half-assed. There's no way in hell it's better than Dr. No. I think this whole discussion should be whether or not it should take spot 4 or 5. I could see it being above Thunderball. It's 1,000% above You Only Live Twice, but it's either above Thunderball or Thunderball beats it. That's the discussion here.
And
I just personally think it is above Thunderball. And like, okay, let me set aside the plot things for a second. Because I think, yes, I know, Charlie, we've talked about like the spectacle and the story and how, sometimes these movies definitely try to raise the spectacle, but then kind of lack on the story. I think the spectacle is definitely here. I also think the story, not the plot, because we are talking about when a lot of these things that you guys were talking about were more related to the plot, not to the story. The story is definitely there. And where you could see as lacking is some of the logic in some of the plot points. At least that's what your arguments are. But that's where I'm like, that's where
diminishes
to me, I think,
my enjoyment of it.
But that's where to me, I'm like, no, I think this movie, at least even in the cinematography, which we didn't really even touch on the cinematography. Because again, I think this is the best.
We could touch on so much.
And I know your
shit.
point, Charlie. I get your fucking point. You take a picture of his shit. It's a great piece. It's a great, fantastic photo.
McCurdy, I agree with you. This is the best photographed Bond movie
and the
to
best.
date.
It has one of the best score. I mean, I love Thunderball's score. It's between this movie and this movie, as far as the score.
That's not that's a cherry on top. That's not going to motivate the raising of it through the ranks. But I will say, I agree with you that it belongs. I never quite finished my rank. I do think it belongs at 4. I think, for me, Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, Dr. No, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Thunderball, and then You Only Live Twice. I think that is the most fair and balanced ranking we can put for all of these.
And on top of that, we also mentioned that like this is a very much gadgetless Bond, even so much that I don't know if he he doesn't even use his Walther PPK until the end, and I love how his PPK gets taken from him early in the movie, almost like signaling to the movie, like, we're not giving him. It was something that with Goldfinger, Guy Hamilton wanted to make Bond less of a Superman, and so by doing so, he adds better villains in the mix. He makes Oddjob stronger. He makes Goldfinger a much better villain than what we've previously seen as far as a maniacal villain and all that stuff. But with this movie, to combat the super spyness of Bond and to make him use his wits more, which we do see in this film, for a lot of the movie, we take all the gadgets away.
I say 5. Scott, I believe you say 5.
I landed on 5, but I was between 4 and 5, and I'm still.
But let's talk that out though. So. Let's specifically talk about
Thunderball
versus this, because like, okay, and specifically, I would say that what it would come down to for me would be Blofeld. Compare him to Largo. I'll always put fucking Largo at the bottom. I think Largo's trash, and I think that this Blofeld is on the far end of the spectrum, which is flesh and blood man who can share words with Bond, versus hidden, and then with You Only Live Twice in the middle, which sucks. It should probably be at either extreme, and I think this Blofeld beats Largo by a long shot. I think even just in individual scenes that they have together, and I
didn't talk about this because I wasn't on the Thunderball episode, and I'm going to go ahead and concede that you're right. Largo fucking sucks. He unforgivably fucking sucks.
Just sucks.
He's literally the worst so far.
Because I didn't like seeing Largo like in the water actively, like part of the mission. And I don't like seeing Blofeld skiing down the mountain either.
Largo sucks.
Why don't you like that though? Why don't
I just want him to be the mysterious head of Spectre,
because of how badly Largo
pulling
sucks.
Strings.
I accept this ranking.
But again, and I think to Charlie's point, yeah, like they make him more. They fix the problem that they had with You Only Live Twice, where he's just like, you take them, like most of that movie, he is the guy behind the curtain, and then the end of the movie they reveal him, and you're like, this guy sucks. Like he just runs away and he's pitiful. But at least now that they're establishing, this movie does a lot of setup and payoff in this movie. And that was something I noticed in this movie going on. Like even the helicopter flight, you know, he's looking down and she's like, see, there's that's where the avalanche happened. And there we have bobsledding. And then and so we know ahead of time that, yeah, these are going to be things that are going to happen in this movie. That's something that they establish, is that, oh, Blofeld's active in this movie. He's taking an active role in finding Bond. He is not just some asshole sitting in a chair with petting his fucking pussy. You know, he's actually going out and trying to do these things. And that makes him a better villain because he's not just someone ordering people around. He's
and at least when he's skiing down the mountain, he's organizing his men.
Yeah,
he's not chasing after Bond and hitting him with shit.
Yeah,
he's organizing his men. And I think that's interesting. I think also, though, like Largo needed a lesson in keeping Bond alive. Here we go. The segment of Keep Bond Alive that we always have. In this movie, Blofeld keeps Bond alive for a very clear reason, which is you're going to help sell my whole plan to the government so that they'll leave me alone.
You'll be very useful in helping to convince the authorities that I mean what I say.
That alone makes him better than Largo, you know?
To make a final point, I know this, we've decided it comes down to Blofeld, but to avoid further hypocrisy on my part, I am going to go ahead and say, because the action in this movie is so good, especially for being a movie that's trying to establish emotional depth, I'd be a hypocrite being somebody who prefers an action-filled Bond movie. Like, it's wrong for me to say that it belongs at 5. Given the fact that I like the action, and I like the setting, and I like that the setting makes... or that the action like makes good use of the setting. Like it'd be one thing to just put it in the mountains, but the fact that they did the bobsledding and all that shit, like, and used the setting is effective. Like I that's, to me, like, I know McCurdy likes these movies for the actual emotional content, but like, to me, it's an action movie. And I said at the beginning, like when I actually read my whole initial statement, I said the action is good.
Yeah, I like to be fair. I think four is fair, and I will go with 4. I'll be to the point of the group.
Can you guys just hug through the screen?
Yes,
Can you two just hug?
Yes, but
can you cry
Patterson, I love the action in these movies too.
I have not written a poem. Like who has
That's a great
ever
poem.
written you a poem in your life?
No one.
Okay.
You're the first.
There's one criticism of Blofeld I'd like to make, though, one additional, which is that Blofeld, mastermind, would never have believed that Mercy flight was legit. He would have been like, nope, something's fishy. Get the fucking guns loaded up.
You see, it is nothing.
That seems to have settled it.
But he's like, see, it's nothing. Like, if he was distracted by Tracy, that would have been cool. But and if it would have just been like two of his guys who were like the fact that they brought Blofeld in and they were like, sir, these people are claiming a Mercy flight, and he's like, I told you it's nothing. I don't buy that. Blofeld is literally holding the world at ransom, and he's just gonna believe the first ruse coming his way.
Yeah.
No. He's smarter than that. I think that was a mistake, but that's not enough to make him dumber than Largo.
No, but yeah, and again, this movie has those weird plot things where you're like, what, this is weird. And I don't necessarily think, I don't completely agree with all of the ones that you're saying. Like, there's things where I'm like, yeah, your movie would be cool, but it's not the movie.
I'd still rank it last personally, but I acknowledge like the points that everybody's made.
Again, also, we also established, again, this probably has one of the better Bond girls, which I want to add, if you guys didn't know, Diana Rigg, who is the Bond girl in this film, she is the Queen of Thorns in Game of Thrones. The Avengers? I think she's I read that. Yes, and that was the other thing.
Holy shit!
She's in Game of Thrones.
Queen of Queen of Thorns.
She's the one who says, "I want you to know. I want you to tell Cersei it was me, that motherfucking bitch."
Wow.
That's who that is.
Fucking awesome.
Cool. She's that fucking cool. And yeah, Patterson, like you said, this is the second time in the Bond franchise where they pulled from the Avengers, because Honor Black, like we know earlier, Honor Blackman, Pussy Galore was from the Avengers. She was another similar character on that show. And they obviously were like, oh yeah, this girl's badass. We've done this before. Let's pull her and put her in this Bond movie. And again, I think she's one of the best Bond girls. If I had to rank Bond girls, she's one of the better Bond girls.
She's literally the first Bond girl to...
She has a character.
To have a knockdown, drag-out fight. And I think that's disrespectful towards her character.
But
the Queen of Thorns never fought the mountain and won. The Queen of Thorns was a fucking genius.
Regardless of your point about the
fight, in the realm of the psychological.
Regardless of the point of your fight, I think comparing her as a character, a fully fleshed out character, she's not just somebody whose Bond just happens upon, or is on a mission with.
No, but he did. He just happened upon her.
He happens upon her and then just leaves, but we actually spend a lot more time with her, is what I'm trying to get at. We spend time with her, and it's not just in the context of
and we get to know her pretty well. We do.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting at, is she is a character versus many of these other Bond girls that are very two-dimensional.
Yeah, I still disagree about the relationship, but I'll acknowledge we get to know her pretty well.
Okay, real quick, though, what we haven't talked about, though, is her father, Mr. Draco. Draco is our tiger, our Karen Bay of this episode. And he is I really like the guy. I really like Draco.
He's my favorite character in this film. I'm gonna go ahead and say that.
Totally. Yeah.
He's my favorite character in this film.
If you guys are a fan of Batman, again, we've mentioned Batman earlier before, but the character of Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul directly is inspired by this film with those two characters, where he's essentially a head of a crime syndicate. The idea of that came as Paul, it doesn't matter. You guys aren't going to know the.
Well, and he looks like Draco.
Yeah,
Ra's al Ghul looks like Draco.
Came from Draco and Tracy. That's where they got Ra's al Ghul and
that's like.
So Chris Nolan was really all over this movie.
Yeah, he likes this.
That's actually kind of cool. Now that you mention it, that is cool.
I love the idea that he's like the good Spectre. Like, yeah, he's a bad guy. But he's, and I actually looked up the organization. Apparently that may be real. I'm not, it's from Croatia, so I don't know if it's real or not.
That's still cool, though.
I also just want to point out that Draco is maybe he was a bad father at first, but then I don't know. He had like a second coming as a good father, and then he's like, his pitch to Bond is like, my daughter went to school and became a feminist, and I need you to fuck the feminism out of her. I need you to dominate the shit out of her until she comes around and quits being a cunt.
And it's funny because like what Bond tells him is just like, she needs like mental help, dude. Like she needs
yeah.
Like she needs a psychiatrist.
She needs like doctor help, and he's like,
but the moment Bond bangs her, like immediately she goes from like a suicidal maniac to I'm gonna have your babies.
3 girls, 3 boys.
Immediately
Which again, I
comes
still
around.
say makes a weird relationship.
I liked
That's what Bond does.
this isn't talking about Draco, but I liked how she's like, well, you bought me, so this is your night with me, and he's like,
He literally, he's
Yeah.
like, my daughter is a feminist and a hooker.
he's like,
And like she showed that she's a fucking
Yeah.
hooker.
What she needs is a man to dominate her, to make love to her enough to make her love him.
but he's like, no, I don't want to bang you because I bought you off. Like I was trying to be nice. Like that's like.
But then in the
that's not what
morning,
I was
I mean,
trying to go
Bond
for.
only wanted sex, and then
Because
he gets
Bond
sex.
doesn't-
But then she leaves him the money in the morning. So did she
Yeah.
fall in love with him because he fucked her so good? Just like Draco said, I need you to fuck my daughter until she loves you, and that's why she paid
I
up.
don't think that's the if I was going like you had said in From Russia with Love, like when's the moment where he falls in love or where what's her name falls in
Yeah,
love with Bond
on the train.
That to me is
Romanova.
not that moment. I think it comes in. She falls in love with him. I think when she comes to his father's birthday. This dude she just fucking bangs there. She's like something's up. Oh wait, this guy only wants information to he like.
Yeah,
I'm getting
she's smart.
I'm part of this scheme. This is fucking bullshit. I can't believe this. And then she goes off in tears. And I think she falls in love with him when she realizes that Bond actually cares about her and isn't.
But why does he
that's-
care about her? That's the big question. Why does he
I
care
think he just
about
sees
her?
some again, like with a lot of these women, he sees something interesting in them, and then obviously he doesn't fall in love with her then, but I think she falls in love with him.
I will not go without. You'll have to.
I just want to say that the best father in the world also, at the drop of a hat, punches his daughter in the face in order to save her life,
Yeah.
which apparently Gunther didn't think to do. Pretty easy to knock her the fuck out. So, after the great McCurdy Patterson battle, we've somewhat found ourselves somewhat in the middle, with Goldfinger staying at number 1, From Russia with Love number 2, Dr. No number 3, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, George Lazenby intro and outro picture number 4, Thunderball number 5, and you fucking only live twice still at the bottom. For now, that's our rank, bitches. I feel good about it. I think that list
Yeah.
is fucking primo.
Yeah.
Yep.
To wrap things up, as we're saying, and as I have said before, this to me is the last of the Bond films. Even though, yes, there are plenty more Bond films after this. This to me is the last Bond film, and I'll say this because every film after this movie either tries to have callbacks or throwbacks to every previous of these first 6 films in some way or form. Whether it's a train scene, whether it's a skiing scene, whether it's an underwater scene, there's always some kind of callback to these movies. It's also fitting to say that this is the last movie of the 60s. And this kind of also ties into why Lazenby left. So they're making this film. Again, like I mentioned before, Lazenby is getting a little arrogant with the whole I'm the star kind of thing. And in that arrogance, he's getting a little too much. It's the end of the 60s. This is 68. If you know anything about American history, 68's a pretty tumultuous year in America. There's a lot going on. You had Vietnam War. There was the anti-establishment movement. We had hippies and that kind of thing. He was kind of getting a little more into that with the drugs, and growing out his hair and that kind of thing. And this movie has shades of that in the movie with the mod look and feel of the costumes and things like that. Like the cravat that I wore today in honor of this movie.
Psychedelia shit going on
so
and how
you
they dress and all that.
Yeah, so you see a little bit of that in the movie. Lazenby would say, and this is part of his, his agent was kind of convincing him and say, look, like these Bond thing, this is going to end. Like, this isn't going to continue. And he had a point. You know what I mean? Like, you got to remember at the time, and when we get to some future movies, you'll kind of see maybe he was kind of right, that the Bond thing as what it is now is going to kind of fade away. It's trying to hold on to this Bond thing. So what does the Bond films do? They find what's popular right now. How do we keep this relevant and latch onto that as a vehicle to keep these things going?
Yeah.
So in that regards, his agent was kind of right. But he was looking at it and seeing like the anti-establishment movie being a big thing. Easy Rider, MASH, these were more popular movies that were becoming more popular. People were kind of stemming away from this establishment type film, which is the Bond films are very much so. And this so much that when Lazenby went to the premiere, he grew out his hair, and the producers didn't even want him to. And before this, the producers even had begged him to sign his contract, which he wouldn't do, for a 7-film deal after this film. So he wasn't even signing. They even like offered him 7 films, and they offered him $1 million. They were like, "Here's some fucking like that film I was talking to you about." Like they show he had a fucking case, and Harry Saltzman's like, "Fucking take the money, sign the contract," and he wouldn't do it out of his own arrogance or whatever. So really, it came down to him just kind of being like disillusioned with it, and just like, I don't really want to do this. I didn't want to continue with this, which would leave the franchise in kind of a conundrum. And that's also why, again, I consider this in that Connery era, even though he's not in this movie, is because of that. Also to note, and I mentioned this to Charlie, was that originally the idea, this movie is to me like a lost cause. Like they had an idea where this movie could have led. Like this could have been the beginning of a new franchise in a way, like a soft reboot of sorts. And the idea originally was that the scene with Tracy getting shot and them driving off and all that stuff was going to be in the next film. So they shot the movie, and Peter Hunt was like, we're going to shoot in a movie in such a way that he drives off in the wedding, and that's the end of the movie. Then when we start Diamonds Are Forever, which was still planned to be the next film, that the beginning of the movie would be, them driving,
and then she gets
Tracy
whacked.
getting shot. And then that would lead into the next Bond film being Diamonds Are Forever, which, that would be a very strong opener for the next Bond film. Of course, they didn't do that.
It certainly would have weakened this movie. And I think we all are interested in that universe out there that has Sean Connery starring in this picture. It really would have been interesting to see, because I'm so torn on Lazenby. I think he's... I've seen this movie a million times, and I think he's all right. But I watched this, and then I watched Dr. No, and then I watched this again, and Lazenby just straight up doesn't have it.
No,
he just doesn't have that certain element that makes him Bond, and I'm okay with him in this movie, and I like this movie. Again, I don't think it belongs at the bottom. But what's tragic though? He works for this movie.
Film. But if you were to put Lazenby in the other films, he wouldn't. And some people would argue. Some people would argue that even if Connery was in this movie, hypothetically, there's other hypotheticals besides Connery being disillusioned with the franchise and all that shit. But hypothetically, had he been in this movie, I don't think he would have gotten the same movie because of the the inexperience, at least, and the vulnerability. Things that I think actually we see in later films in probably maybe to a better degree, but regardless, like people would always say, maybe if Connery was in this movie, it would have been the best Bond film. I'm not necessarily on that camp. I'm like, maybe
Connery was saved by the fact that he wasn't in this movie.
I don't know.
Like it's like Lazenby came along.
I mean,
and
it's all
kind
hypothetical
of
at this point. Like, who knows?
Totally. All we can do is do a deep fake. Somebody can do a deep fake someday of Sean Connery starring in this movie. But all in all, what it comes down to is, as much as George Lazenby may be the Ringo Starr of the James Bonds, he's still a motherfucking James Bond. And on that note, the man deserves our toast for being James Bond, even if only for one time.
Yep.
So cheers to George.
I'm going to do a bit of a tradition break here and promote one more cheers, and that's to Tracy. Best Bond girl, doesn't even finish the film. Gets killed right at the end.
Yeah.
To Tracy as well.
And she had just recently passed away too, so. If you liked this video and you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon. And if you want to watch more episodes like these, click the links to the sides of me. Now I'm off to do some evil scheming and plotting of my own. Mwahaha.